Oberyn Nimmerose Martell woke that morning with a profound clarity he could not fully explain. His rest had been brief, overtaken by the tension of the trial by combat that would decide Tyrion Lannister's fate. He felt the dawn's cool air brushing over his naked shoulders as he rose from his bed. The world seemed in sharper relief, and so did his sense of purpose. Thoughts haunted him throughout the morning, half-formed dreams of his sister Elia's final moments, and a feeling, no, a certainty, that he had a chance to seize both vengeance and triumph. The Red Viper of Dorne had known many battles. He had spilled blood in Essos and Westeros alike, but none of his duels had ever felt as weighted with destiny as the one that would unfold in the capital's arena. A twisted portion of him even felt a spark of excitement, that burning, savage longing for conflict that coursed through his veins. The mountain Ser Gregor Clegane would bleed or he would. It was simple as that. Walking out to meet the sun's first rays, Oberyn let his eyes stray over King's Landing's rooftops. He took in the labyrinth of muddy streets, the flicker of cooking fires, and the tolling bells from distant septs. Every corner of the city was rumored to harbor secrets and vices, but he had no illusions. The greatest monstrosity in the sprawl of men was the beast he would face before the entire realm. He could almost imagine he saw Gregor's hulking form through the city walls, pacing like a caged monster. Yet Oberyn felt no fear. For too long, Dorne had waited for a champion to avenge the ravaged memory of Elia Martell and her children. Even if fear stirred in him, he refused to feed it. The only thing Oberyn would allow himself to harbor was that single-minded determination. He was the spirit of Dorne, and he would not falter. He dressed with care, selecting garments that did not restrict his movements. The sunburst sigil upon his surcoat glinted, a golden explosion upon dusky orange, embroidered meticulously. They were proud colors, the living memory of his family, stitched by tailors whose craft reached back centuries. He cinched his belt with deliberation. Today, 1,000 eyes would watch his steps, high-born lords, ladies, the common folk who had flocked to see this spectacle. Tyrion Lannister's life hung in the balance, but Oberyn's personal vendetta burned just as hot. Too many nights he had spent remembering a child's blood on the walls of the Red Keep, recalling the bitterness of secret rumors that trickled across the narrow sea when he'd been in exile. Too many times had he pictured Gregor's face and how it would contort in pain. If Oberyn won, House Martell's vengeance would be realized, and beyond that, perhaps justice for all who had ever feared the mountain's brutality. He found Ellaria Sand sitting at a small table, sipping spiced wine in the private dining room assigned to him. Her eyes flickered up when he entered. She wore a midnight blue gown that bared her shoulders, and the gold rings in her ears danced with the shift of her head. He paused, an unspoken love passing between them as she rose to greet him. Ellaria had her own fears, though she tried not to show them. She was half smiling when she reached for him. Their lips met gently, a fleeting moment of warmth. "Make him pay for what he did," Ellaria whispered. Her voice held that husky undertone that always roused Oberyn's passion for her. "Make him cry out for mercy he'll never receive." Oberyn offered a ghost of a grin. "He'll do more than cry," he promised, letting her words buoy him. "But first, I must ensure I remain alive long enough to hear him scream." He drew her closer, inhaling the faint sandalwood perfume at her throat. He promised a future she dared not speak of, a world where the mountain was gone and no further vengeance need be plotted in the dark corridors of Oberyn's heart. Then he withdrew, steeling himself. It was time. The city had awakened. The trial awaited. At the great September of Baelor's courtyard, the crowds were gathering. Here, in front of the gods, guilt or innocence would be decided. Or so the pretense went. Oberyn understood it was more spectacle than a genuine act of faith, for the gods had no interest in the petty disputes of men, or so he believed. Only the individuals involved truly decided these matters by skill or cunning. The sun was still climbing, warming the pavements. Whispers rippled through the throngs as the Red Viper approached, resplendent in his light armor, agile and deadly as a coiled serpent. He felt their gazes upon him, the hush of the crowd like a breath drawn and held. Eyes darted from the slender form of the Dornish prince to the monstrous figure on the other side. Gregor Clegane stood in battered plate, towers of steel that looked as if a blacksmith had hammered them straight from a mountainous slab of iron. He dwarfed even the knights who served under Tywin Lannister, so wide and tall that he seemed more beast than man. His helmet was shaped like a snarling hound's head, though ironically it was his brother who bore that moniker. Oberyn might have found humor in that if the mountain's crimes had been less heinous. But as it was, every time he looked at that helm, he pictured the monstrous act that had shattered his family. Rage laced with bitter sorrow spurred his blood into a storm. He entered the makeshift arena with a lithe prowl, brandishing his spear. He remembered how Tyrion stared at him from his seat, a guarded hope etched across the imp's features. Tyrion had told him, "I'd like to think I've found my champion," and Oberyn had responded with unspoken confidence. The imp had pinned his salvation on the vengeful quest of a Dornish prince. Now it was Oberyn's moment to deliver that salvation and his own. He cast a glance at Tyrion, nodding once as if to say, "Fear not, I keep my word." The High Septon intoned the formalities, his voice echoing across the stones. Tywin Lannister watched without expression, though Oberyn could guess the tension within the Lord of Casterly Rock. The mountain was Tywin's favored monster, the unstoppable force he set upon his enemies. Oberyn took secret pleasure in the idea that Tywin might soon see that monstrous dog put down. Meanwhile, Cersei stood, lips drawn in a thin line, her disdain for Tyrion overshadowed by her intense desire to see the Prince of Dorne fail. But Oberyn cared nothing for her. He had locked eyes on Gregor Clegane, who did not shift nor move as if carved of granite. They stepped forward. The hush thickened. The breath of countless onlookers seemed to vanish in a moment of collective anticipation. Oberyn steadied himself, recalling years of training with spear and blade, how he had faced warriors from the fighting pits of Meereen, from the free companies of the disputed lands, from the savage hill tribes beyond Westeros. He exhaled slowly. The fight began. What followed in the first few minutes felt like a swirling dance. Oberyn moved in tight arcs, feinting with the spear's tip, urging the mountain to lunge and expose a gap. He was smaller, far more nimble, and used every advantage. Gregor's great sword heaved through the air, whistling with lethal force, but Oberyn slipped away with a dancer's ease. Each time, the crowd gasped. Each time, Oberyn's spear snaked in and clanged against the mountain's armor, leaving shallow scrapes. "Say her name," Oberyn shouted, venom dripping from each syllable as he circled. "You raped her. You murdered her. You killed her children." His voice carried across the ring, echoing in the hush. He wanted Gregor's confession, wanted him to shriek out the truth. The mountain responded with inarticulate rage, an upward slash that clashed against Oberyn's spear shaft. Oberyn pivoted, let the spear spin, took a step back. The mountain followed, hammering blow after blow, forcing Oberyn to give ground. But Oberyn's footwork was impeccable. His passion demanded an emotional outburst, but he tempered it with decades of discipline. He would not be undone by Gregor's brute strength. Then, after another sidestep, Oberyn thrust the spear into the gap at the mountain's right shoulder. A spurt of blood flecked the weapon. The crowd shrieked. Gregor grunted. He reeled for an instant, gave a savage roar, and brought his sword down in a crushing blow. Oberyn dodged, narrowly, but the shockwave rattled his bones. The stone courtyard cracked beneath the mountain's blade. Oberyn pressed the advantage, swirling around the behemoth, jabbing at the thick plates, seeking the next weakness. Another stab, another well-placed slash. The mountain's armor was as thick as any in the Seven Kingdoms, but Oberyn's skill was whittling him down, leaving him bleeding from gaps in the metal. "Say it!" Oberyn bellowed again. He refused to relent. Blood thrummed in his ears. The crowd's roar and the echo of steel crashing on steel dulled to a faint undertone of noise that seemed inconsequential. His entire focus was on Gregor's shifting weight, the angle of his next swing. Oberyn's heart hammered, but his grin was feral, triumphant. Dorne's vengeance was at hand. He saw the doubt flicker in Gregor's eyes, even behind that monstrous visor. Yet the mountain delivered a punishing counter. His sword swept wide. Oberyn ducked, but the steel clipped the side of his spear, splintering the weapon near the tip. Oberyn shifted backward, breathing heavily. The spear was still usable, though its once perfect balance had been compromised. No matter. The mountain advanced, leaving spattered droplets of red in his wake. Oberyn's own body hummed with adrenaline. He circled left, pressed in, darted a jab. This time, he managed to slip the spear under Gregor's arm. A grunt, a spasm of gore from beneath the armor. The crowd roared. Tyrion was on his feet, half in shock, half in hope. Oberyn saw the mountain stagger. It was now or never. He closed in for the final blow, jabbing for the mountain's neck. That was the moment Gregor lashed out, hooking his massive hand around Oberyn's wrist. The spear rattled from Oberyn's grip. The mountain's sword fell from his own hand as he seized Oberyn's tunic. The two men struggled with terrifying intensity. Gasps of horror shuddered through the crowd. Oberyn felt the mountain's monstrous strength pinning him. Pain flared in his ribs as an ironclad gauntlet squeezed. He could hear Illyria's scream, high and shrill, cutting through the chaos. He felt his vision go dark at the edges, black splotches dancing. But Oberyn had not spent his life unprepared for close combat. He twisted his lower body, hooking a leg behind the mountain's knee. Gregor lurched forward. The combined efforts of Oberyn's twist and the mountain's unsteady stance from his injuries allowed the Dornishman just enough leverage. He slammed an elbow into Gregor's visor. The massive knight's grip faltered. Oberyn gritted his teeth, ignoring the stabbing in his side, and jerked free. A desperate scuffle ensued. Gregor snatched at him again, seizing Oberyn's left arm in a crushing hold. Oberyn bit back a cry of pain, wriggling to reach the dagger sheathed at his belt. He slammed the dagger into the gap at Gregor's helm, right beneath the chin. The mountain convulsed. Dazed, the behemoth reeled, his hands flying up to the wound gushing dark blood. Oberyn stepped back, half limping from the damage to his ribcage, and kicked the mountain's sword away. A hush of disbelief rippled through every onlooker. Gregor stumbled, sank to his knees with a thunderous clank of steel. With a furious snarl, Oberyn ripped the dagger free, ignoring the slick warmth that bathed his hands. Gregor's massive body toppled forward. Oberyn took a trembling breath, eyes wide. The mountain giant, monstrous, unstoppable, collapsed onto the stones. Blood pooled around him. His breath came in ragged, wet sputters. "Confess," Oberyn hissed, though the words were quieter now. It was more a personal plea than a show for the crowd. "Confess to what you did to my sister." Gregor groaned, but no coherent words emerged. Then, in one last heaving breath, he coughed thick blood from between his lips. His entire body shivered, spasmed, and then went still. The Red Viper stood, battered but alive, watching with a cold mixture of triumph and hate. The crowd erupted. The voice of the High Septon thundered above the chaos. "The gods have spoken. Tyrion Lannister is," and the old man hesitated before concluding, "innocent in the eyes of gods and men." A delirious wave of noise followed. Lords and ladies blanched in disbelief. Many had expected Oberyn's flamboyance to seal his doom. Tyrion exhaled a shaky breath, relief etched across his face. Nearby, Lord Tywin's expression tightened, his jaw working slowly as if forcibly reining in emotion. Cersei let out a long, trembling exhalation that might have been shock or dismay. Her champion had fallen, and along with him, a portion of her carefully orchestrated plans to condemn Tyrion. Guards fidgeted with uncertainty, some unable to tear their eyes away from the hulking corpse of Ser Gregor Clegane. Oberyn sank to his knees, partly out of exhaustion, partly from the throbbing agony in his ribs. Illyria rushed to him, dropping by his side. He leaned into her with shallow breaths. He was alive. He had done it, avenged Elia, if not by a dramatic confession, then at least by the mountain's blood. By the sun and spear of House Martell, Gregor Clegane was dead at last. A tear, half fury, half relief, escaped Oberyn's eye. The ghosts of the past still hovered, but perhaps they would torment him less now. Amid the commotion, Pycelle's voice droned official words about carrying away the corpse, about the legality of the results. Tyrion was freed from his shackles. Men shouted, some in dismay, others in triumph. Oberyn did not hear most of it. Darkness flirted at the edge of his vision, but Illyria's voice kept him anchored to the present. The Red Viper lived. Dorne's vengeance was made flesh. However, he had no time to savor this moment of victory in peaceful contemplation. The aftershocks were already rippling through King's Landing, and soon enough they would cascade across the Seven Kingdoms. Word spread swiftly. Before the day was out, the streets buzzed with rumor. The Red Viper slew the mountain. He did not even have a shield. He danced around that hulk like a snake, so quick you could barely see. Tyrion Lannister is innocent. Did you hear what the Boy King said? And on in the gossiping tongues of fishmongers and stable hands, gold cloaks and serving maids. In taverns, they drank to Oberyn's name. Others cursed him, for their wagers had favored the mountain. That evening, the city seethed in a swirl of talk and speculation. How would Tywin Lannister respond? Would the Martells demand more than just Gregor's head now that Oberyn had triumphed? Would war come again? Oberyn, for his part, spent much of that evening recovering in a private chamber assigned by the royal household, with Illyria fussing over him. A maester pressed poultices to the bruises that were already blossoming across his side and arms. Oberyn waved away concerns, too proud to show how much pain he truly felt. He demanded wine, and so he drank. Illyria stayed close, her worried gaze searching his face. He gave her a reassuring smile, or tried to, as she tested his bandages. I'm alive, he murmured, eyes half-lidded. What better cause for celebration could there be? Illyria's lips curved in a gentle, pained smile. Alive, yes, but battered. You can't fool me, Oberyn. I see the hurt in your eyes. If you had been just a moment slower, then I would be on a pyre, Oberyn said lightly, though he winced as he shifted. Don't dwell on near misses. My sister's wraith is soothed, I hope, and I've brought justice for Tyrion. A start, at least. He closed his eyes, recalling the moment Gregor's life had slipped away, felt unreal. For years he had carried that hatred, that vow of vengeance. Now the deed was done, though he suspected it would not bring back restful nights as easily as he once imagined. Still, the knowledge that Gregor would never again walk the earth, never again defile another life, gave him a grim satisfaction. Tomorrow, he told himself, he might remain Abed, letting the city's gossip swirl. Then, eventually, he would confront Tywin Lannister. The old lion had orchestrated Elaya's demise. Perhaps Oberyn's victory was only the first step in a much longer confrontation. The next days in King's Landing were fraught. Tyrion Lannister was officially freed of charges related to Joffrey's death, though Cersei seethed at the turn of events. The realm was in turmoil, for many had pinned their hopes on Tyrion's execution. Sansa Stark was still missing, rumored to have fled under suspicious circumstances. Peter Baelish was nowhere to be found. Rumors circulated that Oberyn's victory had stiffened the spines of many who opposed the Lannisters' rule, though it was far too soon to see the real consequences. For his part, Oberyn refused to hide away. He and Illyria made bold appearances at feasts and gatherings, defying whispered suggestions that he should flee back to Dorne before Tywin took revenge. Let the old lion glare, Oberyn thought. I am not some timid cub. Illyria was never more radiant, her fingers entwined with his, the glow of triumph lighting both their faces. Lords and ladies who had once sneered at the Dornish pair now eyed them with caution or respect. Even Mace Tyrell, a man usually prone to puffed-up arrogance, offered polite words of congratulations that sounded hollow but necessary. Oberyn accepted them with a wry smile. He was not naive, though. He knew his presence here was precarious. Tywin Lannister would bide his time, no doubt. Cersei's hatred was boundless. But Oberyn had made it clear he was not leaving until he had negotiated something deeper. Retribution for Elia Martell in the form of an official, public statement condemning the crimes of the Mountain and all who gave him orders. However, Tywin refused to acknowledge giving any such order. The matter hung like a vulture overhead. In an ornate meeting chamber within the Red Keep, Oberyn soon found himself seated across from Tywin, the cold-faced patriarch of House Lannister. The walls were richly adorned with crimson drapery, the table set with gold filigree. The lion crest was everywhere, as if to proclaim who truly owned these halls. Tywin sat with posture stiff, hands folded on the table. Cersei hovered behind him in a dark gown, eyes glimmering with malice. Kevan Lannister, Tywin's brother, was also present, a silent observer. Oberyn had arrived alone, save for Illyria, who waited outside by his instruction. Prince Oberyn, Tywin began, voice measured. I presume you know why I asked for this meeting. Oberyn's dark eyes flicked over Tywin's stern face. You wish to address the matter of the Mountain's death, he said, letting the barest hint of mockery curl his lip. A man you yourself called upon to do your bidding. I wonder, do you plan to thank me for ridding you of such a dangerous servant? Cersei bristled, but Tywin showed no outward anger. Ser Gregor Clegane was a knight sworn to House Lannister. His feats in the field were legendary, but his brutality was never intended as a reflection of my personal orders. You slew him in lawful combat. I have no complaint about that, though the manner in which you demanded confession was unseemly. Unseemly, Oberyn echoed. I recall the unseemly manner in which my sister was violated and murdered, her children slaughtered. How curious that the mildness of my methods offends you more than the crime she endured. Tywin's jaw set. Cersei spoke up, her voice dripping cold fury. You speak to the hand of the king, Prince Oberyn. Show some respect. Oberyn raised one eyebrow. Respect is earned, not given by titles alone. There was a tense silence until Tywin cleared his throat. We all know the truth. Rebellious forces used the sack of King's Landing to commit atrocities. It was a time of war. While I regret any harm to House Targaryen's scions, you regret Oberyn cut in the same way one might regret dropping a chalice? Allow me no illusions. Elia was no Targaryen scion, but a Martell of Dorne, and you unleashed your dogs to ensure no heir might challenge the new reign. The entire realm knows it. The difference now is that one of those dogs is dead. Tywin's eyes narrowed slightly, but he managed a steady voice. I proposed this meeting to speak of peace. The Iron Throne has no desire for renewed war with Dorne. I assume that is not your wish either. Oberyn tapped a finger on the table, feigning contemplation. War is seldom my first choice. Yet justice must be done. My dear niece, Arianne Martell, and my brother, Doran, have waited long to see some restitution. We appreciate that the mountain is no more. But you, Lord Tywin, stand at the heart of this. Even the dead cannot speak if you silence them. Cersei's face flushed. You dare suggest? Tywin raised a hand, cutting her off. His voice turned curt. What do you want, Prince Oberyn? Oberyn paused, letting the tension build. A public declaration from the crown acknowledging that Elia Martell and her children were wrongfully slain by Ser Gregor Clegane. A condemnation of that act and an apology issued to House Martell. Furthermore, we desire certain assurances that the throne will never again condone harm to our bloodline. That is what I want, for a start. Cersei bristled, but Tywin's gaze flickered to Kevin, then back to Oberyn. The old lion was cornered. If he refused, Dorne might rise in open rebellion. The Martells were not alone in their discontent. War with the North was still ongoing, the Riverlands were restless, and King's Landing had not fully recovered from the chaos following Joffrey's death. Tywin needed stability. Oberyn suspected the man was too pragmatic to risk another front. Tywin spoke at last, quietly. It can be arranged in a carefully worded statement. The King and the Hand will decry the killing of Princess Elia and her children by Gregor Clegane. Dorne will be recognized as a valued part of the realm, and your loyalty will be publicly affirmed in turn. Oberyn's gaze was cold, assessing. He nodded just once. That will suffice for now. Cersei's lips parted as if she meant to object, but Tywin silenced her with a glance. The tension in the room was suffocating. Oberyn stood, inclining his head in mocking courtesy. Then I look forward to hearing the crown's official message. Good day. With that he left. Outside in the corridor, Illyria was waiting, anxious. He took her hand, leading her away from the Lannisters' watchers. His body still ached, but pride surged. He had forced Tywin into a corner. No, it would not return Elia or her children to life. But it was the first time House Lannister would openly acknowledge the crime. That, at least, was a victory. Yet Oberyn knew Tywin would not forgive or forget. The old lion's pride was vast, and vengeance might take subtle shapes in the future. Oberyn felt the eyes of the court upon him as he passed. The Red Viper was no fool. He had struck at the head of House Lannister by slaying his monstrous champion and demanding open acknowledgment of a historical atrocity. Time would tell whether that hornet's nest would remain quiet or swirl into fresh troubles. Days later, the promised proclamation was read aloud in the throne room. King Tommen, a boy of tender years, repeated the words placed before him by the Hand, Tywin Lannister. The statement was formal, measured, acknowledging the tragedy that had befallen Princess Elia Martell and her children, condemning Ser Gregor Clegane's cruelty, and reaffirming Dorne's importance within the Seven Kingdoms. Though many recognized Tywin's influence in carefully crafting the language, the condemnation of the mountain was explicit. Oberyn stood with Illyria among the assembled court, expression impassive. Behind him, the subtle stir of satisfaction passed through the Dornish retinue. This was a moment they had awaited for nearly 2 decades, if not exactly in this manner. Cersei's gaze burned into Oberyn the whole time. He felt her loathing like a hot brand. He only smiled faintly in return. Tyrion was at the fringes, alive and free, eyeing the scene with his own brand of keen interest. When the ceremony ended, murmurs broke out, swirling around the throne room. The realm had acknowledged one of its ugliest secrets. Of course, rumors abounded that Tywin had orchestrated it all, but no official proof was offered. Still, the official condemnation counted as a blow to the Lannisters' veneer of righteousness. For Oberyn, it was something of a triumph. But as the days passed and the dust settled, Oberyn found himself restless. The Mountain's death, the partial admission of guilt, the swirl of politics in King's Landing. None of it truly erased the pain of Elia's memory. Perhaps nothing ever would. Yet he felt the future beckoning. Dorne needed him. His brother Doran had always been more patient, more measured. But Oberyn had rattled the capital's cage, and that in itself was valuable. As he paced the courtyard of the Red Keep, ignoring the curious stares of Lannister guards, he wondered if he should remain or return home. Then news reached him that his niece Arianne was pressing for an audience with King's Landing in the near future. She had ambitions, and Doran was quietly supporting them. Perhaps staying longer might yield more gains for House Martell. He decided to remain for a while. The day after that resolution, Tyrion Lannister sought him out. They met in a small garden terrace overlooking the Blackwater Bay. A warm breeze rustled the lemon trees. Tyrion wore a simpler attire, free of the humiliating manacles that had once bound him, though his face was drawn with tension. He glanced at Oberyn, expression solemn. "I haven't had the chance to properly thank you," Tyrion said. "You saved my life. I realize your motivations were your own, but still, I'm grateful. And might I say, I'm quite pleased you remain in one piece, though battered." Oberyn allowed a wry grin. "I had reasons beyond your freedom, but you're welcome. I hope you use your life wisely, Im. There are many here who would have been pleased to see your head on a spike." Tyrion's mouth twisted. "Yes, particularly my darling sister and father. But they've been thwarted for the moment. I'd be a fool to assume their hostility has waned." "Not at all," Oberyn agreed. "I suspect your father especially is not one to let grudges go. I must watch my own back as well." They walked slowly around the terrace, the sun dipping low behind the towers. Tyrion cleared his throat. "If I may inquire, what do you plan to do now? The city is rife with tension. Dorne's perspective, I imagine, has shifted with your victory." Oberyn paused, letting his gaze drift to the shimmering waters. "I plan to push for more Dornish autonomy, or at least ensure we're treated as an equal kingdom, not a province to be exploited. Doran has his strategies. I'll do my part. As for you, Tyrion, where do you stand?" Tyrion sighed. "In my father's shadow, as always, or so it feels. I'm free, but not safe. Perhaps I'll bide my time, see if there's a chance for me to exit the stage gracefully. Maybe I'll write a book on the wonders of Dornish wines. Or dream of a quieter life." Oberyn smirked. "You? A quiet life? Hard to imagine." A faint chuckle escaped Tyrion's lips. "Yes, well, the life I imagined fell apart. My nephew, the king, was poisoned on my wedding day, my father and sister conspired against me, and my paramour ended up testifying against me under duress. The world I knew is broken. Perhaps it's time to craft a new one." He paused. "That might involve forging new alliances. With House Martell, for instance." Oberyn eyed him with interest. "A cunning idea. If Dorne and certain Lannisters combined efforts, we could shift the balance in the realm." Tyrion shrugged. "I can't speak for the rest of my family, but I remain indebted. Should you ever need my counsel, you have it?" Oberyn nodded, a silent accord passing between them. Then they parted ways, each lost in his own thoughts. The sun set over Blackwater Bay, gilding the waters with orange fire, not unlike the sunburst of House Martell. The weeks turned into months. Tensions simmered as Tywin methodically strengthened alliances with the Tyrells. Cersei continued to wield her influence. Yet Oberyn remained in the capital, partly at Doran's request, partly out of a personal desire to see how events would unfold. Ellaria adapted to court life with surprising ease, charming certain lords with her frank wit, inciting scandal among others by her unabashed sensuality. She would dance late into the night, swirl in bright silks that revealed glimpses of her sun-kissed skin. Oberyn reveled in it, letting them whisper. The staid ladies of the Reach were sometimes scandalized. He could not care less. Though each day brought new complexities, Oberyn also found time to indulge in pleasures. He partook in feasts, tested the local wine cellars, introduced some Dornish spices to King's Landing's kitchens. The court's social scene glimmered with revelry in those uneasy months, a veneer to cover the realm's deeper fractures. Through it all, Oberyn remained vigilant. The last time he had underestimated a powerful enemy, he had nearly lost his life in the courtyard duel. He would not be caught off guard again. His nights often ended in whispered conversations with Ellaria, sometimes in bed, sometimes by a low-burning brazier. She would rest her head on his shoulder, and he would speak of the day's intrigues. He found in her a source of steadfast support. She had her own cunning, her own ability to read people's true desires behind their courtly masks. She told him that Cersei watched Marjorie Tyrell with open loathing, that Pycelle was a trembling leaf under Tywin's stern glare. She gleaned these details from the talk of ladies' maids and petty courtiers, weaving them into a tapestry of intelligence. Oberyn listened with satisfaction. They were well supplied with knowledge, if not unstoppable. One starlit evening, just before turning in, Oberyn studied a letter he had received from Doran. It bore tidings of Myrcella Baratheon's presence in Dorne. Her betrothal to Prince Trystane was part of a strategic arrangement to keep the realm stable. Oberyn read the letter's concluding lines, which subtly urged him to keep pressing King's Landing for further concessions and not to trust the Lannisters even if they offered sweet words. Oberyn smiled grimly. His brother's caution was well-founded. Then news came that the Ironborn were raiding again in the north, that Stannis Baratheon had marched on the wall in an attempt to aid the Night's Watch. The realm's troubles multiplied. Tywin's focus was fracturing. In this climate, Oberyn spied an opportunity. He began sowing quiet alliances among certain storm lords and river lords who had no love for the Lannisters. He did not overtly conspire against the throne, rather he cultivated friendships, letting them know that Dorne remembered old slights but desired a realm free from oppressive central control. It was the sort of subtle maneuver that Oberyn usually left to Doran, but he found a certain thrill in it. Politics, after all, was just another dance. He excelled at dancing. Cersei was not blind to these maneuvers. She confronted Oberyn in a corridor one afternoon, flanked by 2 Kingsguard knights. Her eyes were sharper than daggers. "You spread your Dornish venom among the lords," she hissed under her breath. "Think you can usurp the Lannisters' place in the capital? We will not allow it." Oberyn tilted his head in mild amusement. "I speak with who I please, Queen Regent. Fear not. I have no interest in your father's chair, if that's what concerns you." She scoffed. "Do not feign innocence. You Martells crave vengeance. Even if Gregor is dead, you will never be satisfied. But be warned. My father destroyed House Rain and House Tarbeck for less than what you attempt. A lion does not fear a viper's hiss." Oberyn offered a cold smile. "Your father's a formidable man, but so am I, dear Queen. I've proven that already. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting to attend." The Knight's Guard bristled, but Cersei let him pass. He felt her gaze burning into his back. The lioness was prowling, and Oberyn knew to remain wary. Still, he could not resist the allure of pushing boundaries, or the potential to shape the realm's future as a place where Dorne stood as an equal rather than a subjugated province. A new complication arose when rumors arrived that the long-lost Daenerys Targaryen was conquering slave cities in Essos. Whispers said she commanded dragons. King's Landing was rife with speculation. Some lords scoffed at the idea that the Targaryen girl could threaten Westeros. Others recalled the devastation one dragon could bring, let alone 3. Oberyn listened with a quietly intrigued mind. Elia Martell had been wed to Rhaegar Targaryen. That made Daenerys a sort of distant relation by marriage. Might the future of House Martell lie with her cause? Or would that just invite chaos? Dorne had always had a particular connection to the Targaryens, dating back to the era when Princess Meria of Dorne resisted Aegon the Conqueror. Oberyn's thoughts drifted to the possibility that Daenerys, if she truly had dragons, might be unstoppable should she cross the narrow sea. He had no illusions that Tywin Lannister would handle that with grace. War could erupt anew, bigger than anything since Robert's rebellion. Perhaps Oberyn's victory over the mountain was only a prelude to greater storms. As these grand considerations loomed, Oberyn still had day-to-day matters. He visited the training yard to keep his body sharp, though his injuries from the duel occasionally pained him. The young knights watched him with awe and a bit of apprehension. He was the Red Viper, after all, the man who slew Gregor Clegane. Sometimes he found himself giving pointers to a bold squire or a daring man-at-arms. He took a strange satisfaction in instructing them, reminding them to value speed and cunning over brute force. His style was exotic to Westerosi knights, and they soaked up his teachings with curiosity. One day in the yard, Jaime Lannister appeared, his golden hand glinting under the sun. He regarded Oberyn from across the practice dummies. The tension in the air was immediate. Jaime approached with a measured gait. He had lost his right hand, the famed sword hand, and now was forced to train anew with his left. He looked at Oberyn, and the memory of how Oberyn had defeated the mountain flickered in Jaime's single good hands stance. "You fight with a spear," Jaime said neutrally. "I was always taught it's a commoner's weapon, but you wield it like a prince's scepter." Oberyn offered a half-smile. "In Dorne, a spear can be a gentleman's weapon as much as a longsword, especially if you know how to use it to exploit your enemy's weaknesses." Jaime nodded, glancing at the stumps of practice dummies. "Could you show me some of your footwork? I'm learning new ways myself now." Surprise flickered through Oberyn. He had expected hostility. Instead, he sensed a weary humility in Jaime, a man who had lost everything he once took for granted. Perhaps the Kingslayer was not the same man he used to be. Oberyn shrugged, seized a practice spear, and offered a brief demonstration. Jaime watched carefully, occasionally attempting to mimic the steps with his sword. They shared few words, but the session was oddly respectful. Afterward, Jaime wiped sweat from his brow. "I suppose we are both changed men," he said quietly. "Gregor was a terror to many, myself included at times. You faced him and won. Maybe that's something I needed to see, a chance to realize that the unstoppable might not be unstoppable." Oberyn studied him for a moment. "Change can bring surprising alliances," said Jaime. "But remember, your father and sister remain who they are." Jaime's expression grew distant. "I know." He bowed stiffly and left. Oberyn watched him go, pondering whether there might be cracks forming within House Lannister that time and events would only widen. By the time autumn leaves began to curl and brown, Oberyn had grown restless once more. A letter arrived from Doran urging him to return home. The Prince of Dorne wrote that their fatherland needed Oberyn's presence for discussions regarding the future, matters that could not be entrusted to ravens. The letter hinted at deeper negotiations with an envoy from Essos, possibly connected to Daenerys Targaryen. Intriguing. Oberyn felt the familiar thrill of a new path opening. Perhaps Dorne might ally itself with the Dragon Queen. Perhaps not. Regardless, Oberyn could sense the winds of change blowing across the sea. He prepared to depart King's Landing. Word spread that the Red Viper would soon leave. Many courtiers watched with relief, as if a dangerous animal was finally being removed from the menagerie. Others sensed the significance of his departure, the potential shift in alliances. Tyrion Lannister found Oberyn in the Red Keep's yard the morning he planned to depart. They exchanged cautious farewells. Tyrion thanked him once again, pressing a small token into Oberyn's hand. A finely wrought brooch shaped like a scorpion. "A thank-you gift," Tyrion explained. The scorpion seemed somehow fitting for a viper. Oberyn smirked at the irony. He clasped Tyrion's hand, a gesture of mutual respect, then turned away. Ellaria awaited him, along with a retinue of Dornish guards who had traveled north to escort him home. As he left the shadow of the Red Keep, Oberyn glanced up one last time at the towers, recalling the swirl of intrigue he had navigated. He had slain the Mountain, forced a public confession of sorts from Tywin Lannister, preserved Tyrion's life, and solidified Dorne's position in the realm. He had done all this, and yet it felt like a beginning more than an end. Their procession wound through the bustling city, heading south. The roads were dusty, dotted with travelers. Some recognized the Martell banners and cheered. Others merely gawked. Oberyn wore a light cloak over his armor, mindful of the glare of the sun. Ellaria rode beside him, her hair pulled back in a braided crown. Her face was calm, her eyes keen. Ahead of them lay the Prince's Pass, the deserts, the mountains, and finally, the water gardens and Sunspear, where Oberyn would see his brother Doran and his beloved daughters once more. Crossing the dry Dornish hinterlands, Oberyn felt a surge of belonging. The land was harsh, but it was home, with its burning sun and desert winds, its towering red mountains and shimmering salt flats. He almost smiled at the memory of childhood hunts, of nights under the star-filled Dornish sky, drinking spiced wine with free companions. In King's Landing, he was the Red Viper among the Lion's brood, mistrusted and feared. Here in Dorne, he was simply a prince returning to his domain, where the soil itself seemed to welcome him. Upon arriving at Sunspear, the capital of Dorne, Oberyn and Ellaria rode into the wide courtyard. Servants rushed to greet them. News of his victory had preceded him, of course, and cheers echoed in the thick evening air. Oberyn dismounted, letting a stable. "Eboe take his horse." His chest puffed with a certain pride. He was alive, triumphant, and back in the land of his forefathers. Illyria's eyes sparkled as she surveyed the familiar spires and sun-scorched walls. This was her home as well, and she reveled in the adoration of the small folk. Up the winding corridors they went, past colonnades of sandstone. At last, Oberyn reached Doran's solar, where his elder brother sat in his wheeled chair by an open balcony. Doran's face broke into a smile upon seeing Oberyn. They embraced carefully, mindful of Doran's gout-weakened body and Oberyn's still healing bruises. In that moment, both were simply brothers reunited, not princes with the weight of their house on their shoulders. Illyria stood back, letting them share that familial bond uninterrupted. "You did it," Doran said quietly once they had parted. "You avenged Elia, the mountain is gone." Oberyn nodded, voice low. "I wish it could bring her back, but at least the realm will never forget her suffering now." Doran's eyes shone with gratitude and sadness. "It is more than I dared hope." "King's Landing, how do they react?" Oberyn let out a breath. "Tywin hates me, but I forced him to issue a public condemnation. Cersei loathes me as well, but can do little. Tyrion Lannister remains an interesting ally. The realm fractures in other ways, though. War with the Ironborn, trouble in the north. And rumor says Daenerys Targaryen grows her strength in Essos." At Daenerys's name, a flicker of something sparked in Doran's eyes, hope, caution, or perhaps curiosity. He nodded. "We'll discuss that at length. For now, rest. Let your mind and body recover." He gestured to a table laden with fresh fruits, wine, and breads. "I have accommodations prepared for you and Illyria." Oberyn smiled, bowing his head. "Thank you, brother." He left with Illyria, the warmth of Dorne's late afternoon sun lulling him into a sense of ease. The next days passed in a haze of reacclimation. The dryness of the Dornish air felt different from King's Landing's humidity, and Oberyn breathed it in greedily. He strolled through the water gardens, letting the laughter of playing children wash over him. He visited his daughters, the sand snakes, who greeted him with unbridled joy and curiosity about his duel. They hung on his every word as he recounted how he had slain the mountain, sometimes making them squeal with delight and horror in equal measure. But soon enough, the seriousness of the realm's future pressed in. Oberyn sat at council with Doran in a private chamber. Arianne Martell was there, her dark eyes shining with ambition. Several trusted advisors listened as Oberyn recounted in detail the climate of King's Landing, the alliances that could be formed, and the possible threat or opportunity posed by Daenerys Targaryen. Doran listened in his calm, methodical way, occasionally steepling his fingers. Arianne would interject now and then with questions or pointed suggestions. At one point, Oberyn cast a glance at Arianne, who wore a simple but elegant dress in a deep shade of red. She listened intently. He remembered how spirited she was as a girl, how determined to shape her own path. Now she was a woman grown, cunning in her own right, set to be the next ruler of Dorne if all went to plan. "It might be wise," Doran said softly, "to see if Daenerys Targaryen truly has dragons under her command, and if so, whether she intends to press her claim on the Iron Throne. If she does, we have a unique familial tie to her line, through Elia and Rhaegar. It might be enough to forge an alliance." Arianne leaned forward. "An alliance sealed by marriage, perhaps. Though I'm not certain how the Targaryen girl would respond to the idea. We need to confirm her situation first." Oberyn tapped his chin. "A spy or envoy would do well. Someone discreet. If the rumors are true, she's taken Meereen and abolished slavery. That alone makes her popular among the common folk there. But does it translate to power across the sea?" Doran nodded. "In time, yes. For now, we gather information. We must proceed carefully. House Martell has waited decades for retribution. We can wait a bit longer to ensure we place our bets on the winning side." A flicker of impatience flared in Oberyn's eyes. He had never been as patient as Doran, but he respected his brother's measured approach. "So we bide our time. Meanwhile, the Lannisters remain in power. Tywin grows older, though. The next generation might prove easier to unseat." Arianne laughed softly. "Or they might tear each other apart. Cersei is rumored to be paranoid. Jaime is changed. Tyrion is disliked by his kin. War from the north, trouble in the east. The realm is a tinderbox waiting for a spark." Oberyn's lips curved. Perhaps that spark is Dorne. They shared a moment of camaraderie, an unspoken understanding that House Martell stood on the precipice of renewed influence in the Seven Kingdoms. The vengeance for Elia had ignited something in them all, a sense of pride and possibility. They talked late into the night, plotting next steps, discussing the best envoys to send across the narrow sea, analyzing the possibility of supporting or opposing the Lannisters if conflict arose. The tapestry of politics was complex, but they had time to weave their designs carefully. In the days that followed, Oberyn received visits from the Lords of Dorne who wished to congratulate him on slaying the mountain. Some brought gifts, fine wines, exotic fabrics, rare spices. Others brought their own petty disputes, hoping to gain Oberyn's favor. He navigated these visits with the charm and cunning that had earned him his infamous reputation. He also spent time with his daughters, instructing them in the ways of the spear and whip, ensuring that each sand snake had her father's skill in arms. He would watch them train with bright pride, particularly the older ones Obara, Nymeria, and Tyene, who each had inherited pieces of his fiery spirit. Nightly, he returned to Illyria's embrace, where he found comfort from the swirl of responsibilities. She too felt relief at being away from King's Landing's constant tension, though she missed the excitement of the capital's feasts. They would sit in a courtyard under the starry Dornish sky, sipping on sweet wine, talking in hushed tones about what was to come. Sometimes Oberyn would muse on the real nature of vengeance. He told her he felt both lighter and more burdened since the mountain's demise. Light, because that old hatred had found release; heavier, because now that the rage did not fill his heart, he felt the sorrow more acutely. She would hold his hand, her fingers warm against his, and say, "We will build something new, my love. Let the past's ghosts guide us, but do not let them devour us." He would kiss her, tasting honey wine on her lips, and think that perhaps the path forward, uncertain as it was, offered him a chance to shape a better world. One evening, an unexpected visitor arrived in the form of Balon Swan, a Kingsguard knight sent by King Tommen to treat with Dor and Martell. The man was polite, disciplined. He brought fresh tidings from King's Landing. It seemed that Cersei Lannister, as Queen Regent, wished to cement ties with Dorne by sending the young Princess Myrcella to visit more formally. Oberyn smirked, knowing full well Myrcella had already been living under Dornish hospitality per earlier agreements, but the Lannisters wanted a show of goodwill. Possibly it was Cersei's attempt to keep tabs on Dorne. Possibly it was Tywin's effort to maintain the appearance of unity. In any case, Balon Swan was also carrying a set of presents for Oberyn, including a finely made new spear with golden inlay, a token from the crown to honor his valiant performance in the trial by combat. Oberyn nearly laughed. It was a gesture so transparent. The crown had to acknowledge his strength, but it also wanted to bribe him into loyalty. He accepted the spear, tested its balance, and nodded politely to Ser Balon. Then he gave the man a measured look. "Tell the Queen Regent I appreciate the fine workmanship. I look forward to putting it to use should the realm require my skill again." Swan bowed. "I shall, my prince." The next day, Oberyn summoned the Dornish Council again. They discussed the crown's olive branch. Doran saw no harm in receiving Myrcella more publicly, as it might calm tensions. Oberyn shrugged. "So be it. Let the Lannisters think they had pacified Dorne if it gave House Martell room to maneuver." Meanwhile, hidden correspondences were already traveling eastward, seeking more information about Daenerys Targaryen. Throughout the next few weeks, Oberyn found his routine settling into something close to normalcy, if such a word could be used for a man like him. He met with envoys, trained with his children, spent nights with Illyria, and occasionally visited the water gardens to watch the commoners enjoying the pools. He would see smallfolk girls splashing, reminded of how Elia once played with their brother Doran in those same waters long ago. The memory brought a pang, but also a sense of continuity. Life in Dorne flowed on, unstoppable as the tide. He had avenged Elia. The realm spun on. Now it was up to him to shape what came next. During one of those visits to the water gardens, Doran accompanied him in the wheeled chair, guided by attendants. They watched the children playing, their laughter echoing off marble columns. Doran turned to Oberyn. "Brother, do you ever wonder if we can truly change the course of history, or if we're just pawns moved by fate?" Oberyn tilted his head. "I used to think fate was a tale we told ourselves. Then I see how events unfold, Elia's death, my victory, the Targaryen girl with dragons. It's as if the gods spin a story, but perhaps we have free will to shape it." Doran's expression was thoughtful. "Yes, we do what we can. You faced the mountain and lived, defying what many called certain doom. That alone is a testament to choice over fate, I think." Oberyn smiled. "I prefer to think so." He gazed out at the bright sunshine dancing on the water's surface. "The future beckons. Whether or not the Targaryen returns, whether the North rises again, whether the Ironborn burn the coast or not, Dorne will remain. Doran nodded, a small smile curling his lips. Yes, it shall. In the months that followed, Oberyn sometimes felt a restlessness gnaw at him. After so many years wandering Essos, fighting in the disputed lands, dabbling in poisons and knowledge, he was used to motion. Staying in Sunspear for extended periods tested his patience, but the intrigues that swirled around him provided enough stimulation. Letters arrived from King's Landing, from Tyrion, filled with wry observations and cautious updates. The Lannisters were maneuvering to keep the Tyrells in check, tensions ran high, and there were whispers of the Faith militant possibly being rearmed if Cersei provoked the High Sparrow. Oberyn raised an eyebrow at that. A fanatical religious force would only add more chaos. He responded to Tyrion with an invitation to visit Dorne someday if he could slip away from the Viper's nest that was King's Landing. At the same time, reports from Essos trickled in. Daenerys Targaryen had consolidated her rule in Meereen, was forging alliances, apparently struggling with local insurgents called the Sons of the Harpy. Yet her dragons continued to grow. There was no word she planned to sail west yet, but Oberyn sensed it was inevitable. The old Targaryen blood burned hot. Sooner or later, she would look to reclaim the throne her ancestors had once held. Meanwhile, the North was embroiled in its own brand of turmoil, with rumors of wildlings crossing the wall and the Boltons tightening their grip on Winterfell. Oberyn had never met a northern lord he particularly cared for, save maybe a few who traveled to King's Landing, but he felt a faint sympathy for the unending tragedies befalling the Starks. The realm was unbalanced, and that unbalance might be an opportunity for Dorne. Finally, Doran made a decision to send an envoy to Meereen. Someone close to Oberyn, perhaps one of the Sand Snakes or a trusted retainer, to gauge Daenerys' intentions. Oberyn approved, but did not volunteer to go himself. He had only just returned to Dorne, and for once, the idea of a long sea voyage did not appeal to him. Moreover, he believed a younger, less notorious face might be received more openly by Daenerys. Obara Sand, with her ferocity and sense of purpose, might be the right choice, or perhaps Nymeria with her sly intelligence. They debated the matter. During one such debate, Oberyn found himself alone with Arianne afterward. She studied him, eyes dark with curiosity. "What about you, uncle? Do you hunger to see this dragon queen for yourself?" He considered. "Perhaps, but not yet. I have my fill of risking my life for now." Arianne flashed a mischievous grin. "The Red Viper, sated? Unthinkable." He gave a raspy chuckle. "I'm never truly sated, but I am older than you, child. My bones ache more after a fight than they once did. And for the moment, Dorne needs me here." Arianne's gaze was thoughtful. "Well, if the Targaryen crosses the sea, we might all see her soon enough." As time passed, Oberyn found a peculiar peace in balancing domestic affairs with the knowledge that the realm teetered on the edge of great changes. He had survived the duel that should have ended his life, carried out the vengeance that burned in him for nearly 2 decades, and forced a partial reckoning from House Lannister. Now, Dorne stood poised to play a vital role in the next chapter of Westerosi history. And so it was, on a warm afternoon not unlike the one he had faced Gregor on, Oberyn strolled through the palace corridors toward his private chambers. The sun angled through tall windows, illuminating swirling dust motes in the air. A rush of memory seized him. That moment in the courtyard of King's Landing when the spear had found its mark, Gregor's final gurgling breath. He paused in the corridor, shutting his eyes. "Elia, I did what I promised. It doesn't heal the wound, but perhaps it cauterizes it. The realm stands on the brink, but your children's memory is no longer lost to time." He inhaled slowly, then continued on, a hint of a satisfied smile tugging at his lips. Life awaited, with all its joys and agonies. The Red Viper had danced with death and emerged victorious. The future was uncertain, yet laced with possibility. Oberyn Martell strode forward, determined to seize it with both hands, for Dorne and for himself. And if more battles lay ahead, so be it. He was ready. Weeks later, a raven from King's Landing arrived bearing word of new upheavals. Cersei Lannister had run afoul of the faith, Marjorie Tyrell was caught in scandal, and the capital teetered on chaos once again. Oberyn read the message, then looked to Ilaria with a wry grin. The vipers in King's Landing have turned on each other. How apartment? Ilaria laughed. Shall we go watch? Oberyn considered, then shook his head. Perhaps not just yet. Let them devour themselves for a while. We have other endeavors to attend to. He set the scroll aside, imagining Tywin's frustration if he still presided as Hand. He pictured Tyrion, witty and cunning, trying to survive that maelstrom. The realm was unraveling. He wondered if the peace was ephemeral, if war would soon tear the kingdoms apart. Yet he felt no dread, only a sense of readiness. Dorne had weathered storms before. Under his brother's guidance and his own fiery spirit, they would do so again. And, if need be, strike when the moment was right. The next day, Oberyn led a small retinue across the Dornish countryside, visiting lesser holdfasts to settle disputes in Doran's name. He traveled with Ilaria at his side, the sand snakes trailing behind, each on their own mount. The sun beat down harshly, but the dryness suited him. As they rode, children ran alongside the road, shouting praises to the Red Viper. Oberyn tossed them copper coins with a flourish, smiling at their glee. Where once he might have roamed the free cities for pleasure or scoured the fighting pits for entertainment, he found contentment here, serving Dorne's interests and forging a better future for his people. That night, they camped under the stars near a small oasis. Oberyn lay awake, gazing at the tapestry of constellations overhead. The stillness of the desert wrapped him in quiet. He recalled each step that had led him here, from the moment he volunteered to champion Tyrion, to the clash with the mountain, to the hush that fell when Gregor collapsed. He remembered the savage joy that filled him at that victory, quickly replaced by pain and relief when he realized he would live. Now that moment was a legend retold across the realm and in taverns as far as Braavos. Perhaps bards would sing of it for generations to come. Softly, Ilaria's hand slipped into his, her warmth drawing him from the swirl of memory. She lay beside him, hair unbound, a faint smile curving her lips in the moonlight. She said nothing, but her expression spoke volumes: contentment, love, a willingness to share his burdens. Oberyn squeezed her hand gently. The night was silent save for the rustle of a warm breeze over the sand. He felt a tenderness bloom in his chest, a reminder that vengeance, while powerful, was not the only driving force in life. Love, family, the will to protect and shape the world, those two were reasons to fight and endure. He closed his eyes, drifting on the cusp of sleep, thinking of the unknown tomorrows that awaited. Whether or not Daenerys Targaryen arrived with dragons, whether or not the Lannisters collapsed under the weight of their own schemes, he would not cower. He was Oberyn Nymeros Martell, the Red Viper of Dorne, the man who survived and triumphed against the brute who destroyed his sister's life. He had proven that the impossible could be done. No matter what the future held, he would face it with spear in hand, cunning at the ready, and Ilaria by his side. Let the rest of the world tremble or rejoice. Dorne would rise, free and proud, under the unblinking sun. In the hush of the desert night, Oberyn Martell allowed himself a rare moment of deep contentment, trusting that when the next storm came, he would be ready. And if the gods willed otherwise, let them be damned. He had already defied them once, and he was prepared to do so again. So he slept and dreamt not of blood and death, but of a new dawn rising over the red mountains of Dorne, bright with promise. Oberyn Martell rose at dawn. He had lingered in the desert camp longer than intended, drifting between restful nights beneath a sprawling sky and half-forgotten daydreams about the realm's future. But this morning a sense of urgency stirred him from slumber. He felt the dryness in his throat and longed for a proper meal, for a return to Sunspear's comfortable beds and the murmur of news from across the kingdom. The old restlessness was creeping in again, the one he had cultivated his entire life, that itch to be in the center of things, to shape events rather than let them roll over him. He stood outside his tent, the sand cooling between his toes. Already, the horizon shimmered with pink and gold as the sun inched upward, casting stark shadows across the dunes. In the distance, the hum of his retinue made a low, industrious sound, servants packing crates, knights tending their horses. Ilaria emerged from behind the tent flap, hair unbound and tumbling over her shoulders, a sleepy smile on her lips. He reached out for her hand. Together, they watched the last fading stars blink out one by one. Time to return. Home, Ilaria said, her voice hushed. We've heard from the small folk here, settled the local disputes. You'll go mad if we stay in the wilds much longer. Oberyn laughed under his breath. I enjoy the quiet, but yes, perhaps we've lingered enough. My brother will be expecting my report. His grin flashed. And I suspect the court at Sunspear is just as eager to hear any new tidings from King's Landing. Ser Balon Swan's visit was only the beginning. A short while later, they mounted their horses. The sand snakes joined them, each on a sure-footed mare bred to endure the Dornish heat. Olbara looked impatient to depart while Nymeria carried an air of watchful calm. Tyene rode near the back, humming some old folk tune and teasing the servants. Oberyn felt a flush of pride whenever he gazed upon these daughters of his. Each had inherited some sliver of his nature, yet each was distinct, shaped by different mothers and paths. He urged his stallion forward and they began the ride south towards Sunspear. For most of the day, they traveled without incident. The desert unrolled in dunes and rocky passes until at last the familiar sight of the Green Blood River's lush banks broke up the monotony. Palm trees and brush lined the winding water, and beyond it the road led to Sunspear's gates. As the party neared, the sun was dipping behind the spires, painting the stone in a reddish hue. Oberyn breathed a sigh of relief. No matter how much he wandered, there was something comforting about returning to the seat of House Martell, the place he'd known since boyhood. In contrast to the soaring walls of King's Landing or the austere high towers of Old Town, Sunspear was all golden sandstone and softly arched windows, a fortress shaped by the cunning of 1,000 years of Dornish princes and princesses. A handful of guards saluted as they rode through the outer gate. Courtiers emerged to greet them, bowing or curtsying in that mixture of deference and curiosity. They knew Oberyn was no conventional prince. Some had heard whispers of the fight in King's Landing in excruciating detail, of how he had taunted the mountain with demands for confession, how he ducked and spun with a spear. Many Dornish folk greeted him like a hero, but he could see in some eyes a flicker of wariness. The Red Viper was not the sort of champion who guaranteed safety. His presence often brought unpredictable storms. He dismounted and handed off his reins to a stable boy. Ilaria did the same, pressing a coin into the boy's palm with a smile. The sand snakes dispersed, eager to wash off the dust of the road. Oberyn lingered in the courtyard to speak with the castellan, who rattled off updates about the castle's supply stores, the minor lords who had recently arrived seeking audience, and the continuing gossip about the realm's chaos. Oberyn listened with half an ear until the castellan mentioned a name that pricked his attention. Balon Swan was still at court, waiting for Doran Martell's final answer regarding Myrcella's presence and any new terms of alliance. Nodding curtly, Oberyn thanked the man and made for the main keep. He found Doran in the Hall of the Sun, a high-ceilinged space where wide windows let in the golden glow of late afternoon. The hall was mostly empty, aside from a few attendants, and Doran himself, seated in his wheeled chair near the dais. He wore pale robes, the color of bleached sand, his face thoughtful. At his elbow stood Arianne Martell, poised and regal, her dark eyes flicking toward Oberyn as soon as he entered. "Oberyn," Doran said warmly, "I trust the journey was peaceful. No bandits, if that's what you mean." Oberyn approached, glancing between brother and niece. "Though we heard rumors that the mountain roads near the Prince's Pass are threatened by outlaws. Word travels that half the realm is in disarray. It was only a matter of time before some scoundrels ventured into Dornish territory." Arianne's lips curved in a slight frown. "We'll handle them. Our scouts are already patrolling. But we have more pressing news." She glanced at Doran, who offered her a nod of permission. "Ser Balon Swan has been very polite, very formal. Yet it's clear that Cersei Lannister is anxious about Myrcella's position in Dorne. She wants more than just a courtesy betrothal to Trystane. She wants our open declaration of loyalty, and she wants to be certain we'll protect Myrcella if any threat arises. The Queen Regent fears the Tyrells as much as she fears her own reflection, it seems." Doran's hand drummed softly on the arm of his chair. "Cersei is not requesting Myrcella be returned, but she wants to be sure her daughter is safe among us." An interesting shift of tone from the woman who, not too long ago, was content to let the mountain run rampant. Oberyn folded his arms. "She's rethinking her posture toward Dorne. Likely Tywin's influence has a hand in it, though I suspect Cersei also sees every shadow as a threat. If the capital is roiling with discontent, she may want Myrcella beyond the city's intrigues." He thought briefly of Tommen, the Boy King. "I wonder if she regrets letting the realm see that the mountain was her dog, one who met his death at Dornish hands." Arianne exhaled through her nose in faint amusement. "Ser Balon claims King Tommen and the Hand are grateful for Dorne's friendship. But the tone of his words suggests a subtle warning, that if we break this fragile alliance, the Iron Throne will have reason to unleash consequences. As if we fear them." Oberyn's eyes glittered. "They have no mountain to unleash anymore, But still, Tywin is cunning. He turned to Doran. What's your inclination, brother? Doran pressed his lips together. To reassure Ser Balon of our goodwill, keep Myrcella content here in Dorne, and quietly observe. As I've said before, we need time to decide our path. Are we to remain allied with the Lannisters if conflict with the Tyrells intensifies? Or do we look east toward Daenerys Targaryen? I'd prefer not to make a rash move until we have more information. Oberyn dipped his head in agreement. Caution is wise, but also time shapes events. The Tyrells might become allies if they break from the Lannisters. Or Daenerys might land on our shores next year with dragons. We can't remain idle forever. Aryen's gaze flicked between the two men, which is why I've suggested we select our envoy to Meereen immediately. Once we know Daenerys' intentions, we'll be better prepared to maneuver. Uncle, will you help me choose who we send? Oberyn nodded. Yes, we should do that as soon as possible. Let's ensure we pick someone capable of impressing a young Targaryen queen who's known for freeing slaves and punishing injustice. Doran gave a faint, tired smile. Then it's decided. We'll finalize the envoy soon. Meanwhile, Ser Balon waits. Perhaps, Oberyn, you'd be willing to speak with him. You have a certain charm that might ease his concerns. Oberyn snorted softly. Charm, you call it. Others might say a flair for intimidation. Very well. I'll see him after I change out of these dusty clothes. He dipped his head to Doran and Aryen. The pair dismissed him with murmurs of gratitude. As Oberyn left the hall, his mind churned through the swirling possibilities. Since returning from King's Landing, he had felt the quickening pulse of the realm's politics shifting. The news from the Crownlands was often contradictory. That Tywin was strengthening alliances with the Tyrells, that Cersei clashed openly with Marjorie, that the Faith was in uproar over rumored royal misdeeds. Tyrion Lannister was still outwardly free, though overshadowed by his father's presence. Meanwhile, the North was embroiled in savage contests between House Bolton and remnants of House Stark supporters. The Ironborn were attacking the western coasts. The realm was, in truth, a powder keg. In his own chambers, Oberyn changed into fresh attire, breeches of light linen and a flowing tunic embroidered with the sun and spear sigil. He strapped on a thin leather belt, from which hung a curved dagger. Even in relative peace, he never went unarmed. Elaria was there, seated by a window overlooking the sea. She wore a loose-fitting gown and toyed with a slice of orange fruit, the juice staining her fingertips. When Oberyn finished adjusting his belt, she beckoned him closer and offered him a segment of the orange. He leaned forward, letting her press the tangy fruit to his lips. He tasted the sweetness, then kissed her wrist. "I must see Ser Balon," he murmured. "Though I'd much rather linger here with you." She smiled in that slow, knowing way. "Duty calls, my viper. Go. Charm him with those dangerous eyes, and then come back to me." He slid his hand along her shoulder, let his gaze linger, then left before temptation kept him any longer. Ser Balon Swan awaited in one of the smaller audience chambers. A courteous man, in Oberyn's estimation neither as coldly arrogant as some Kingsguard nor as brutal as the Mountain once had been. He stood when Oberyn entered, bowing politely. His white cloak draped over well-kept armor, and he carried himself with a certain calm confidence. "Prince Oberyn," Ser Balon said in greeting. "Thank you for granting me an audience. How was your journey in the desert? I trust the bandit rumor was only that." Oberyn waved a hand dismissively. "Roads were clear enough. Dorne is quite capable of handling stray outlaws. Pray tell, how fares King Tommen?" Swan's expression grew diplomatically neutral. "His Grace thrives under the Hand's guidance, though I will not deny that certain tensions remain. The realm recovers slowly from the war. News from the north is troubling, and the Ironborn raids vex even Lord Tywin's formidable patience. In King's Landing, the Queen Regent has turned her attention to ensuring the Faith remains an ally rather than an adversary. Our new High Septon, or High Sparrow as some call him, is quite vocal in matters of morality." Oberyn arched a brow. "So I've heard. And is this High Sparrow also vocal about the Lannisters' various transgressions?" Ser Balon hesitated. "He's vocal about many things, though I doubt I'm the best man to comment on religious concerns. I come here with a simpler purpose, to ensure the safety of the crown's beloved Princess Marcella. Queen Cersei only desires that her daughter remain guarded from any threat. Oberyn regarded him steadily. Marcella is well cared for in Dorne. You've seen her, I assume? Is she happy here? A faint smile tugged at Swan's lips. She seems radiant, my prince. She's grown fond of the local fruits, the music, the way you Dornish treat guests. And your nephew, Prince Trystane, is gentle with her, from what I observe. I'm pleased to see her safe. Oberyn inclined his head. Then you can assure the Queen Regent that Dorne honors its word. We do not harm children. We do not keep hostages in the way that the Lannisters have done with other houses in times past. His voice held a subtle sting, a barb reminding Swan of the old grudges. We have no reason to injure Marcella Baratheon. If anything, we see to it that she flourishes. Yes, Swan said carefully. Still, the Queen would be happier if you might reaffirm your oath of loyalty to the Iron Throne and to Tommen's reign in particular. Oberyn let out a short, amused breath. I have no difficulty affirming that King Tommen sits the throne. But Dorne's loyalty is not the blind variety. We remain in the Seven Kingdoms by choice. We expect respect in return. Ser Balon's expression grew guarded. I understand. The Queen Regent also understands, though she wishes for clarity. A signed statement might ease certain worries in the capital. Oberyn studied him. He knew Tywin's tactic when he saw it. Gather declarations from every major region to quell instability. But after so many years, with the memory of the sack of King's Landing and Princess Alia's murder fresh in Dornish minds, no simple letter would truly bridge the chasm. Even so, Oberyn had no immediate wish to provoke open conflict. I'll speak with Prince Doran. If you remain in Sunspear a short time longer, I believe we can find the words that will satisfy the Queen. Swan nodded in relief. Thank you, Prince Oberyn. As Oberyn turned to go, he paused. Ser Balon, a question, how fares Tyrion Lannister in the midst of all this? He was instrumental in the events leading to my duel with Ser Gregor. Swan gave a faint shrug. Lord Tyrion remains part of the royal family, though I gather he has fewer allies in court than before. Lord Tywin keeps him somewhat at bay. His sister, the Queen, does not hide her resentment. Still, he's cunning. I suspect he's safer than most think. King Tommen likes him, from what I hear. Oberyn's lips curved in a silent smile. Good to know. Safe travels, Ser Balon. He left then, his mind lingering on Tyrion. That shrewd dwarf was no friend to his father and sister. Oberyn wondered if he might end up fleeing the city someday. With the faith in a clamor and Cersei's paranoia growing, anything was possible. Still, that was Tyrion's concern. For now, Oberyn had plenty to handle here in Dorne. He returned to Doran and Arianne, summarizing Swan's requests. Doran listened impassively, nodding when Oberyn repeated the bit about a formal pledge of loyalty. Arianne pursed her lips in mild distaste. They want a parchment with all the right seals to wave around, so they can reassure the lords in the Reach and the Stormlands that Dorne is docile, she said. Docile is not the word, Oberyn said dryly. But yes, that's the gist of it. Doran tapped his fingers. We can send them a carefully phrased response. Let them see we're not about to rebel, but also let them read between the lines that we remain our own masters. We'll not tie our hands if the realm plunges into chaos. Agreed, Oberyn said. He paused, then broached a new topic. I'd like to propose the envoy to Meereen be chosen soon. Who shall it be? One of the Sand Snakes? Or someone else? Arianne exhaled, glancing at Doran. I've considered sending Quentyn, but my father has reservations. Doran shifted in his seat. Quentyn is dutiful but lacking in charisma. The Targaryen girl is said to be fiery, and she's a liberator by nature. I'm not sure Quentyn would charm her. He paused. But perhaps he might represent the sober side of Dorne, show that we are more than flamboyant warriors. It's a complex decision. Oberyn's lips twitched in faint amusement. If you want flamboyance, my daughters would do well. Though I worry they might start fights if they found the court in Meereen not to their liking. Arianne laughed. Tyene might kill half the Meereenese before she even got to Daenerys. Doran frowned, though his eyes sparkled with a trace of humor. We must ensure we don't spark any misunderstanding. I recall the stories of Daenerys's 2 bloodriders, fierce Dothraki men. If a sand snake were to cross them in the wrong way, we could lose a potential alliance. Well then, Oberyn said, perhaps Quentyn is indeed the safer choice. Or we send a small party with a mixture of personalities. We can finalize that soon. He shifted his stance. We should also consider timing. If we dispatch them now, it might take months to reach Meereen, gather information, and return. A lot can happen in Westeros during the time. Doran nodded gravely. Indeed. But we cannot remain blind to Daenerys' doings. Her dragons are rumored to be growing. Each day we delay, we risk missing an opportunity or the possibility that she crosses the sea, forging alliances with other lords first. We Martells might then find ourselves scrambling to catch up. Then we move soon, Arianne decided. Uncle, will you speak with Quentyn? He looks up to you, and if he's to go, I want him to have your advice. Oberyn smiled. Of course. They concluded their discussion, leaving Oberyn with a faint sense of anticipation. He recalled the Targaryens from his youth, the remnants of that dynasty who lingered in memory. Elia had been married to Rhaegar, their children dashed to pieces by the mountain. And now a new Targaryen scion rose in Essos, forging her own legend with dragons. Was it fate or simply a cycle the world could not escape? If Daenerys did sail for Westeros, the Lannisters might face a reckoning far beyond Oberyn's single-handed vengeance. That night, Oberyn found Ellaria on a breezy balcony overlooking the sea. She stood with her forearms on the balustrade, hair whipped by the salty wind. The sun was a red ember sinking into the water. Oberyn slid an arm around her waist, pressing himself close. The day's events swirled in his head. He inhaled her familiar scent, letting some tension drift away. She looked at him askance. You have the face of a man juggling a dozen knives, my prince. He laughed softly, fingertips tracing the small of her back. The realm is a stage crowded with dancers and swordsmen, love. We weigh alliances with the Lannisters, the possibility of a Targaryen queen returning, the future of Myrcella and Dorne. Meanwhile, bandits creep into the passes and the Ironborn are burning ships in the Sunset Sea. Sometimes I dream of simpler times. She turned in his arms, resting her palms against his chest. When were times simple for Oberyn Martell? He kissed the tip of her nose. Never. But it's a pleasant fantasy. They stood together, watching the sky deepen into twilight until servants arrived with word that dinner was served in the main hall. Oberyn and Ellaria joined the rest of the household, including Doran, Arianne, Trystane, the Sand Snakes, and others for a modest feast. Much of the conversation revolved around local gossip. Two minor lords disputing a water right, a wealthy merchant from Planky Town offering a new variety of spiced wine, and so forth. But beneath it all lay the hum of bigger concerns. Oberyn observed Doran closely. His brother was not a man who liked to show his hand, yet Oberyn could sense the gears turning behind Doran's mild exterior. They both knew that if Daenerys Targaryen truly brought dragons back to Westeros, the Martells would have a unique place in that story. When dinner concluded, Oberyn lingered behind to speak with Quentyn Martell. Doran's son was a few years older than Arianne, a steady young man with a serious mien. He had been educated in the marches, spending time as a ward, learning the ways of chivalry from houses sworn to Dorne. But he lacked the flamboyant spark that often defined the Martell blood. Where Arianne was bold, Quentyn was measured. Where Oberyn was impulsive, Quentyn was cautious. Still, Oberyn saw potential in him if guided correctly. They walked together down a corridor lit by flickering torches, speaking in low tones. Quentyn wore a simple tunic belted at the waist, his dark hair cut short. He bowed his head politely as Oberyn caught him up on the day's events. Father has mentioned the possibility of sending me east, Quentyn murmured. I'm aware it may be dangerous, but if it serves Dorne, I'm prepared. Oberyn studied his nephew's earnest face. It may be more than dangerous, Quentyn. You'd be walking into a foreign land where plots abound. Daenerys is the mother of dragons, they say, and she is surrounded by freedmen, ex-slavers, Dothraki, unsullied, and exiled knights. You'll need cunning as well as courage. Be ready to adapt. Quentyn nodded, brow creased. I've studied trade routes, the customs of the free cities, some of the languages used in Slavers Bay. I know a bit of Valyrian. I'm not the most charismatic man, but I can show her that Dorne is steadfast, respectful of her claim. Oberyn laid a hand on the young man's shoulder. Good. Show her more than that. Show her that the Martells have cause to resent the Lannisters, that we remember Elia's children. She may be sympathetic, given her own losses. And if you must travel in secrecy, rely on your wits. Gold can buy information. Danger will come from many corners, especially if word spreads that you represent a great house from Westeros. Quentyn inhaled and exhaled, steadying himself. I'll do my best, uncle. With that, Oberyn bade him good night. As he returned to his own chambers, he reflected on Quentyn's sincerity and recognized a stark difference between them. Oberyn had always been guided by passion, whether in love or war. Quentyn was more subdued, and that might be an asset in negotiations, but Oberyn worried that if confronted with fierce opposition, Quentyn might hesitate. Still, Doran had faith in the boy, and Oberyn would support that choice. The next few days were a flurry of arrangements. Doran convened private councils with Oberyn, Arianne, and a handful of trusted advisors. They worked through the logistical details of Quentyn's departure, which ship he would take, what route through the narrow sea, how to conceal his true mission from prying eyes, and who would accompany him. While they hammered out these plans, Balon Swan's presence hovered like a polite reminder of the Iron Throne's watchfulness. Doran, with Oberyn's input, drafted a gracious but carefully couched letter for the Queen Regent, reaffirming Dorne's loyalty to Tommen while stopping short of any vow that might entangle them if war erupted. Swan seemed satisfied enough, though Oberyn suspected Tywin or Cersei would parse every line with suspicion. At last, on a crisp morning, Quentyn set out. He had a small retinue of loyal knights and 2 close companions, fellow wards from his youth, men he trusted implicitly. Oberyn and Doran watched from a balcony as the party wound down the sandy roads toward the coast. A ship awaited them in the harbor, discreetly provided by a loyal merchant who had no love for the Lannisters. Illyria, Arianne, and several sand snakes were also present, gazing from the balcony. Illyria whispered in Oberyn's ear, "He seems brave enough. Let's hope fortune favors him." Oberyn nodded, a thoughtful line furrowing his brow. "I hope so. The Targaryen queen could become a powerful ally or a threat beyond reckoning." The day wore on, and Oberyn busied himself with the usual tasks of governance. Dornish lords arrived with trifling disputes. Merchants petitioned for lower tariffs. He conversed with each calmly, offering solutions or promises to speak with Doran. It was an odd position for Oberyn, who had spent so many years living as half an outlaw, half a prince, rarely interested in the tedious side of ruling. But times were changing, and Doran's gout made it difficult for him to attend every matter personally. The older brother relied on Oberyn's directness and Arianne's ambition to keep the day-to-day wheels turning. Occasionally, Oberyn found his mind drifting to the memory of King's Landing. He wondered how Tyrion was faring, how the Tyrells were jockeying for power, whether Margaery's hold on Tommen remained strong. He thought of Jaime Lannister practicing with his left hand in that training yard, a man unmoored by his own losses. And he thought of Cersei, her eyes bright with hatred as she watched Gregor fall. Would she let that hatred fester into more direct action against Dorne? Or would she remain too tangled in her own troubles to pursue revenge? Days slipped by. Then a raven arrived from King's Landing carrying fresh tidings. It confirmed that the Faith had been granted new powers, reviving the old tradition of the Faith militant. The letter was couched in official language, stating that the crown sought to restore moral order in the capital, that the High Sparrow was now an influential figure with the blessing of King Tommen, and that all lords of the realm were encouraged to adhere to the Seven's virtues. Oberyn read the letter with thinly veiled amusement. He knew from various spies that Cersei, seeking to undermine Margaery Tyrell, had empowered the Faith inadvertently. Now, the city was rife with rumor that even the Queen Regent might be subject to the High Sparrow's moral scrutiny. Arianne read over his shoulder, eyebrows lifted. She's playing with fire, letting the Faith regain such authority. Oberyn tossed the parchment onto a table. Cersei believes she can control them. She might be mistaken. The Faith militant has, historically, been a force that served only the gods, at least in their own eyes. If she offends them enough, she might find herself in a cell. Still, it's not our immediate concern unless they attempt to impose their zealotry on Dorne. Unlikely, Doran said from his wheeled chair, gliding into the room with the help of an attendant. The Dornish are far too free-spirited for the High Sparrow to convert easily. Our region has always had a more tolerant approach compared to the strict ways of the rest of Westeros. Let the Lannisters and Tyrells wrestle with the consequences in King's Landing. Oberyn nodded. Agreed. But this does speak to the realm's ongoing instability. Meanwhile, the Boltons hold the north, the Greyjoys raid the coasts, and there's still Stannis Baratheon lurking somewhere near the wall. Arianne gave a half-shrug. He calls himself king, but it seems he has few supporters left aside from a handful of northern lords rebelling against the Boltons. The tides could shift, though. That region has always been full of surprises. Sighing, Oberyn raked a hand through his dark hair. He felt the swirl of events pressing in from all sides. In the days after Quentyn's departure, a restlessness had taken root in him once more. He found himself pacing the halls of Sunspear or practicing with spears in the training yard for hours at a time, as if he could sweat out the tension. He recognized the old stirrings of wanderlust, yet he reminded himself that he was needed here. The shaping of Dorne's future was not a task he could leave solely to Doran, whose health wavered. Arianne was capable, but she was still forging alliances among the Dornish lords, proving herself as heir. Oberyn's presence lent weight to her authority. Amid these responsibilities, a letter arrived from Tyrion Lannister, delivered in secret by a merchant vessel. It was addressed to Oberyn personally. The seal, a small lion's head, presumably to throw off casual eyes, was slightly cracked. Oberyn opened the parchment in his private quarters, scanning the lines. Prince Oberyn? I trust this letter finds you well. King's Landing remains fascinating in the way a pit of vipers fascinates a mouse. My father presides over the small council with unyielding calm, though I sense his patience is tested on all sides. My sister, the Queen Regent, has aligned with the Faith in an attempt to humble the Tyrells, but rumor says the Faith might soon direct its righteous zeal at her as well. I, in turn, continue my life of measured caution. One must always watch for knives in the dark here. I have not forgotten what you did for me in the trial by combat, nor the manner in which you demanded justice for Elia Martell. Events remind me daily that the Seven Kingdoms are a precarious alliance of grudges and secrets. If ever we might find common cause, I stand ready to aid you, though my father would flay me if he knew I wrote these words. A raven may reach me at the Red Keep if it bears your seal, but be warned that spies abound. For now, I remain, as always, the imp in the lion's den. Yours? Tyrion of House Lannister. Oberyn read it twice, lips curling in a faint smile. Tyrion's cautionary tone rang true. The man was trapped in the capital's political labyrinth, but he still extended a cautious hand of friendship. Oberyn found himself moved by the gesture, though he knew better than to place too much trust in any Lannister. Still, Tyrion was one of the few exceptions, a man often scorned by his own kin. He considered how best to respond. If he wrote back, it would have to be in equally vague terms. He wondered if there was any advantage in forging a deeper bond with Tyrion. Perhaps, if the day came when a Targaryen queen landed on Westerosi shores and the Lannisters found themselves outmatched, a partnership with Tyrion might prove useful if Tyrion ended up outside his family's orbit. For the moment, Oberyn decided to pen a polite reply, expressing gratitude and mild concern for the capital's troubles while giving little away about Dorne's current plans. Events continued to unfold at a brisk pace. As the scorching Dornish summer bled into a milder autumn, the world beyond Dorne roiled with fresh drama. Ravens brought news that Margaery Tyrell and her brother Loras were arrested by the Faith on charges of fornication and falsehood. A stunning move that suggested Cersei was behind the effort. But soon after, new rumors spread that the Queen Regent herself faced accusations. The High Sparrow, it seemed, was unafraid to challenge the royal house if he deemed their sins worthy of punishment. Reports varied. Some said Cersei was paraded through the streets in humiliation. Others insisted she would be locked away until trial. This development sent shockwaves across the realm. The Lannisters' hold on King Tommen was in jeopardy if Cersei lost her authority. Tywin Lannister was said to be incensed, but even he found it difficult to move against the newly emboldened Faith militant without risking open revolt among the pious commoners. Tyrion, presumably, watched from the sidelines with a mixture of grim fascination and caution. In Dorne, the immediate impact was minimal, yet Oberyn knew the consequences could be far-reaching. If Cersei fell, who would guide Tommen? Would Tywin emerge stronger, or could the Tyrells regain their influence? Could the Faith, in its fervor, attempt to impose its moral codes across other kingdoms? Dorne was historically more tolerant about matters of sexuality and custom. Would that clash with the new piety of the capital? As all these questions bubbled, Quentyn's mission to Meereen remained a mystery. No word had come back yet. It was too soon. Oberyn occasionally found himself pacing the ramparts, scanning the horizon as if he might glimpse a returning ship. A habit of restlessness. Ilaria teased him gently. "You expect Quentyn to sprout wings and fly over the sea?" she joked one evening, brushing her fingers through Oberyn's hair. He shrugged, half smiling. "If that would hasten news, yes. Patience is not my strongest virtue." She kissed him, and for a time, the troubles of the realm receded. But each day dawned with fresh demands. The bandit raids in the Prince's Pass grew bolder, forcing Oberyn to ride out with a contingent of Dornish spearmen to quell them. He spent a week tracking the outlaws through a maze of rocky canyons. In a skirmish beneath the scorching sun, his men dispatched the raiders with minimal losses. Oberyn personally spearheaded the fighting, his skill with the spear a lethal reminder of how he earned his moniker. A handful of bandits fled, and Oberyn returned to Sunspear with the heads of their leaders in tow. a grim testament to the futility of testing House Martell's might. When he arrived back at Sunspear, exhausted and coated in dust, Ellaria greeted him with a sultry smile. She was waiting in the courtyard, her dark hair braided around her head. A swirl of relief coursed through Oberyn at the sight of her, reminding him that while war and politics consumed much of his mind, there were still simpler joys in life. She led him to the baths, dismissing servants so they could share a private hour. Later, as he reclined against a mosaic-tiled wall, steam curling in the air, she massaged scented oils across his shoulders. "You've grown more serious since the day you killed the mountain," she remarked quietly. He tilted his head back, letting the tension drip away under her deft touch. "I took on the role of avenging my sister for so many years, and now that's done, I find my anger replaced by purpose. Perhaps I realized that slaying Gregor was not the end of my obligations." She pressed her palm along the knot in his shoulder. "Dorne needs you, Oberyn, and you've stepped into the role of a prince who stands for more than vengeance. Some might say this is your true calling." He let out a low chuckle. "A ruler I am not, but a protector, perhaps." He turned, catching her gaze. "Thank you for keeping me grounded." She bent down, kissed him, and for a time, the only sound in that steamy chamber was the whisper of water. Within a fortnight, a new raven arrived with details that rocked the capital. Cersei had indeed been arrested by the Faith militant and was forced to do a walk of penance through King's Landing. The Lannisters, humiliated beyond measure, were reeling from the blow. Tywin raged at the High Sparrow, but even the Hand of the King found it difficult to challenge the Faith without risking a full uprising among the devout. Margaery Tyrell was still imprisoned, and the city was in uproar, with rumors flying of conspiracies, bribes, and hidden manipulations. Oberyn read the missive with dry amusement. "Cersei must be frothing," Arianne commented when she heard. "For a woman so proud, that's a fate worse than death." "It also weakens the monarchy," Doran said in his measured tone. "Tommen is a boy. If both his mother and his wife are locked away, who truly rules? Tywin alone." Oberyn shrugged. "Likely, but I imagine even Tywin can't quell every riot. The city might revolve around the High Sparrow's preaching now. And if half the city is starving or seething from war taxes, the Lannisters can't be comfortable. All this chaos might pave the way for some other claimant." Arianne's lips curved. "Such as Daenerys Targaryen if she decides to sail." "Yes," Doran agreed softly. "Or perhaps Stannis from the north, though it's said he's pinned down by winter storms and Bolton forces. The realm is dangerously unbalanced." He glanced at Oberyn. "And what of Tyrion Lannister in all this? If Cersei is imprisoned, does that change his position?" "I suspect it does," Oberyn replied, "but I haven't heard anything since his last letter. Perhaps he's lying low. He might see advantage in letting his sister destroy herself." Doran nodded. "Let us keep our ears open. The next year could reshape the Seven Kingdoms in unexpected ways." That night, Oberyn brooded at the top of Sunspear's highest tower, gazing at the glittering sea under moonlight. He recalled how the city below had once seemed so small when he was a child perched on these same battlements. He felt the weight of destiny pressing on him again. Once he had wanted only to avenge Elia and see that the Lannisters paid for their crimes. Now that Gregor was dead and a partial admission forced from Tywin, he stood at a crossroads. Did House Martell remain a quiet observer, or did it seize the chaos in the realm to shape a new future? Ellaria found him there, quiet as a cat. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, leaning her cheek against his back. He placed his hands over hers, inhaling the salt of the sea air. "What do you see out there?" she asked softly. "I see the old days fading," he answered after a moment. "The war we thought was over is not truly over. The Lannisters struggle. The Tyrells are entangled. The north is ravaged, the Greyjoys raid, the Targaryen rises in the east. Everything is shifting. Perhaps it's a chance for Dorne to stand tall again, not as a subservient kingdom but as an equal power." She squeezed him. "And what does your heart want?" He exhaled. "To protect Dorne, yes. But also to do justice by Elia, by our entire house. If that means forging an alliance with Daenerys or supporting another claim, so be it. I've learned that vengeance alone doesn't suffice, it must be part of a greater vision. Doran sees it too. He's always planned for something bigger." They stood in silence, the wind stirring Ellaria's hair. At last, Oberyn led her down from the tower, his resolve firming with every step. In the ensuing weeks, the tensions in King's Landing escalated further. Another messenger came, describing how Cersei Lannister was released from the Faith's custody only after her walk of penance, but she was forced to await trial for the charges of adultery and regicide. Meanwhile, Margaery Tyrell was also awaiting trial. Tommen was under the influence of the High Sparrow, and Tywin was rumored to be at odds with that same faith. The entire city was a tinderbox. Oberyn almost felt relief that he was not there, though a part of him missed the thrill of the capital's intrigues. He was in the training yard one morning, stripped to his breeches, practicing spear thrusts in a slow, methodical pattern, when a shout from a sentry reached his ears. A ship was sighted, flying Martell colors, returning from Essos. Oberyn's heart quickened. Quentyn's party? That could not be so soon, could it? He barked orders to the stable to ready horses, then hurried to pull on a light tunic. Riding with a handful of guards to the docks, Oberyn arrived just as the ship glided into harbor. He felt a cold knot in his stomach at the sight of the sailors' grim expressions. His eyes darted, searching for Quentyn. He saw a small group disembarking, men with haunted looks and bandaged limbs. Among them was not Quentyn, but one of his companions, Cletus Ironwood, if Oberyn recalled the name correctly. The young man's face was pallid, his arm in a sling. Oberyn swung from his horse, crossing the creaking plank to the dock. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice rough. "Where's Quentyn?" Cletus looked at him with eyes dark with grief. "My prince, Quentyn is gone." The words struck Oberyn like a physical blow. His pulse thundered. "Gone? How?" Cletus swallowed hard, glancing aside. "We made it to Meereen, but it was chaos. The sons of the Harpy rebelled. Daenerys's dragons, one of them." Quentyn tried. He shook his head, tears welling. He tried to treat with the dragon, some scheme to prove his worth. It burned him alive. We couldn't save him. He died in agony. Oberyn felt the world tilt. Grief and rage surged in equal measure. A memory flashed of Quentyn's earnest face, his soft-spoken vow to do his best. "Gods," Oberyn snarled through clenched teeth. "He's dead." Cletus nodded miserably. "Yes, my prince. We recovered only enough to see him buried. Then we fled. Meereen was under siege from the Yunkai, from Sel's words, from within. The queen herself vanished on the back of her largest dragon, they said. We had to escape or die ourselves. Most of our party was lost. Only a handful of us survived the journey back." A black fury welled up in Oberyn's chest. He seized Cletus's good arm. What of Daenerys Targaryen? Was she complicit in Quentyn's death? Cletus shook his head, tears trembling on his lashes. "I do not know, my prince. Things were in disarray. She was gone, her allies scattered. They said she was carried off by Drogon, the Black Dragon, after an attack in the fighting pit. Quentyn had attempted to strike a deal, something about hatching a plan to prove House Martell's loyalty to the Targaryens, but the dragon was uncontrollable. It burned him, and he died 3 days later. We had no time to seek justice or clarity." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Oberyn stood stock still, cold horror gripping his veins. Quentyn was Doran's son, a gentle soul who had dreamed of forging a new alliance. And now he was ashes in a distant land. The men around them were silent, heads bowed. "Bring them to Sunspear," Oberyn said tightly. "Why? They must rest. The maesters will tend to their wounds." Then, with a fierce exhalation, he mounted his horse again, beckoning Cletus to join him for the ride back. As they galloped towards Sunspear, Oberyn's mind was aflame with guilt, sorrow, and a savage anger that flickered around the edges of his thoughts. By the time they reached the palace gates, he had gathered himself enough to convey the news to Doran. The elder prince's face drained of color upon hearing it. Arianne, standing nearby, let out a strangled cry. It was a brutal blow to House Martell. Doran sagged in his wheeled chair, voice trembling as he asked Cletus for every detail. The youth repeated what he had told Oberyn, how Quentyn sought to prove something to Daenerys's advisors, how he believed a Targaryen alliance might hinge on demonstrating his boldness, possibly even hoping to claim a dragon for himself. Oberyn listened, heart pounding, fury building at the sheer recklessness of it. But beneath the anger was a deep sadness. Quentyn had been ill-suited to such a mad gamble. Who put that notion in his head? Did he do it of his own accord, or did someone whisper illusions of grandeur in his ear? Arianne knelt by Doran's chair, tears sliding down her cheeks. "We lost him," she whispered. "My brother." Doran laid a trembling hand on her head. "I sent him on this mission," he said in a hollow voice. "I bear this fault." Oberyn put a hand on Doran's shoulder. "No one can foresee the madness of dragons, brother. Quentyn made his own choices as well. We cannot blame only ourselves." He paused, voice rough with emotion. "But we must decide how to respond. This is more than a tragedy. Our hopes for a Targaryen alliance are dashed or at least gravely wounded." Doran closed his eyes. "Quentyn is dead. Let us first mourn him. We can speak of alliances after." The next days were hushed and solemn in Sunspear. The banners flew at half-mast. A quiet ceremony was held in the water gardens where the Dornish court gathered to honor Quentyn's memory. Doran, normally so composed, seemed frail and haunted. Arianne stood at the edge of the pool, face a mask of grief. Oberyn, too, felt the sting acutely. He recalled Quentyn's determined expression, the way he wanted to serve Dorne, to build something lasting. Now his life was snuffed out by a dragon's flame in a faraway city. Word trickled out that Daenerys Targaryen was missing, that her councils were in chaos. Some rumored she had flown off to the Dothraki Sea. Others said she was dead. The truth was uncertain. Oberyn heard this news with a bitter pang. So much for forging a path to re-establish a Targaryen alliance. He could not even be certain if the queen was alive to answer for Quentyn's death or to offer condolences. In the midst of mourning, fresh letters arrived from King's Landing. One announced that Cersei Lannister had been formally released into the custody of the Kingsguard, but she still awaited trial by the Faith. Another reported that Margaery Tyrell might soon be freed on some arrangement negotiated by Lord Mace Tyrell and the High Sparrow, presumably involving large donations of gold. Tyrion, apparently, remained overshadowed in the swirl of events, though Tywin still maintained power as hand. Oberyn read these missives wearily. The realm's ongoing chaos felt trivial compared to the personal grief that weighed upon Dorne. He could not muster his usual sardonic interest in Cersei's humiliations or the Tyrells' travails. The only advantage he saw was that King's Landing was likely too consumed by its own problems to exploit Dorne's current vulnerability. In private, late at night, Oberyn sat in the palace's small sept, a place he rarely visited. A single candle flickered on the altar. The sun had set, and shadows danced across the stone walls. Oberyn gazed at the painted figures of the seven. The father, the mother, the warrior, the smith, the maiden, the crone, and the stranger. He was not a devout man, but in that moment, he found himself whispering a plea for Quentyn's soul. He spoke quietly, acknowledging he was no friend to the gods, but if they existed, he asked them to grant Quentyn peace. Illyria found him there, entering softly and placing a hand on his back. Her eyes reflected his sorrow. He turned to her, stood, and let her guide him away. That night, they lay in silence, more comfort than passion, simply holding each other. With Quentyn's death, the question of Dorne's future path was thrown into disarray. Doran confided in Oberyn and Arianne that a Targaryen alliance might still be possible if Daenerys returned, but it was no longer certain they should trust the girl who had let dragons run amok. Moreover, Doran's original plan to wed Quentyn to Daenerys was now impossible. Arianne took up more responsibilities in Sunspear, forging alliances with Dornish lords, ensuring no one used Quentyn's death as a pretext for rebellion or panic. Oberyn, in turn, resumed something of his old self. Fiery, dangerous, determined that Dorne not fall into despair. The grief lingered, but he channeled it into vigilance. He oversaw the training of the household guard, patrolled Dorne's borders with renewed zeal, and remained in close communication with any spymasters able to glean fresh news from beyond. It was during one such meeting with a spymaster, a slender, sharp-eyed woman named Serala, that Oberyn received word of another shift in King's Landing. She reported that Cersei, fearing her upcoming trial, had demanded a trial by combat, just as Tyrion had done before her. The Faith, however, insisted on a champion of their own. Rumors abounded that Cersei named some monstrous Kingsguard knight as her champion, possibly a man rumored to be Ser Gregor reborn, or some similarly massive figure rumored to be the work of Qyburn's twisted arts. Oberyn's blood chilled at that notion. The mountain was dead, he had seen the body, felt the last breath. But if Qyburn had discovered some vile necromancy or some monstrous experiment, could a semblance of Gregor's form be walking again? The idea revolted him. He recalled how the man's blood splattered the courtyard. There had been no question of life left in him, but that did not mean some abomination could not be created from the remains. He parted ways with the spymaster, unsettled, and sought out Doran in his solar. Arianne was already there, reading a letter that made her brow crease. Sister, Oberyn greeted her, then faced Doran. We have troubling rumors from the capital. Qyburn has apparently conjured a champion for Cersei's trial by combat, a behemoth in the shape of Gregor Clegane. Arianne's mouth twisted. Impossible. Oberyn rubbed the back of his neck. I thought so too, but if Qyburn meddles in unnatural arts, who knows? The Lannisters want to reclaim their power, especially now that Cersei's in jeopardy. This might be their gambit to ensure her victory. Doran listened, his face tight with concern. If that's true, it signals the Lannisters are prepared to bend any rule for survival. The faith might balk or might produce their own champion. Another fervent warrior like the legendary Ser Robert Strong or some such name. Either way, it means more strife in King's Landing. Oberyn let out a long breath. The realm seems determined to tear itself apart, brother. Arianne set the letter down. And in the midst of this, Daenerys Targaryen's fate is unknown. The North remains a battlefield of rumors. The Ironborn continue their raids. If the Lannisters do consolidate power again, they may turn on us next, especially with the fiasco over the Mountain's death. Doran's gaze was distant. We have to be prepared no matter which way the wind blows. If Daenerys reappears with dragons, we might see open warfare on the mainland. If she never returns, the Lannisters and Tyrells might remain the main powers. But with Cersei's trial looming, that alliance might crack further. Oberyn recalled Quentyn's ashes, the heartbreak in Arianne's eyes, and the readiness of Dorne to resist any intrusion. We will not be caught off guard, he said firmly. If the Lannisters send an army, we'll bleed them in the passes. If Daenerys comes with dragons, we'll negotiate from a position of strength. We are Dorne. We do not bow easily. His words were stiff with anger, but Doran offered a faint, approving nod. Arianne reached for Oberyn's arm, giving it a tight squeeze. We stand together, she said. The next morning, a visitor arrived unannounced, the dark-haired bastard daughter known as Myrcella Baratheon's companion, wearing the Martell sun pinned to her cloak. She knelt before Arianne, out of breath, and presented a sealed parchment. From the Princess Myrcella, she explained. She begs for an audience that she might speak with Prince Doran about the danger facing her mother. She's heard rumors that the Queen Regent might face a champion you once killed, Ser Gregor Clegane. A spark of surprise flickered over Arianne's face, and Oberyn, who stood beside her, exchanged a look with his niece. Myrcella was not a child wholly ignorant of politics. Clearly, she was hearing rumors from her ladies or from scurrying servants. If she believed her mother was in mortal peril, she might plead for help. A short time later, Myrcella herself entered Doran's receiving chamber. She wore a Dornish-style dress of light linen, though she kept the Baratheon gold clasp at her neck. She looked older than Oberyn remembered, poised in that adolescent cusp between girl and woman. Her green eyes flicked anxiously between the three Martells in the room, Doran in his chair, Arianne behind him, Oberyn standing off to the side. Prince Doran, she said, voice trembling. I beg you, help my mother. The faith is forcing a trial by combat, and if the champion is that horrible man you slew, how could she survive? Please, there must be something you can do. Doran regarded her gently. Princess Myrcella, I am sorry for your distress. But if this champion is indeed some unnatural creation of Qyburn's, we have no authority in King's Landing to forbid it. Your mother insisted on a trial by combat, a custom the faith has accepted. Myrcella's hands clutched at her dress. But the Mountain is dead, is he not? Prince Oberyn killed him. So how can he be champion? Her eyes darted to Oberyn. You must be able to stop this. You avenged your sister. Can you not protect my mother? Oberyn felt a twinge of conflicting emotions. He disliked Cersei with a passion, but Myrcella was innocent in her pleas. He cleared his throat. Child, what you're describing is a rumor of some monstrous knight in the King's Guard, rumored to be Ser Gregor's reanimated corpse, or some experiment. I do not know if it's truly him or something else. Regardless, my influence in the capital is negligible at the moment. Your mother made choices that led to this predicament. She paled, tears welling in her eyes. But she is my mother. I cannot just stand idle. I beg you, if you have any power, please intervene. Doran placed a hand over hers. We will send word to King Tommen, pledging our concern for the Queen Regent's predicament and urging a fair trial. Beyond that, we cannot force the faith to choose a different champion, nor can we ride north with an army just to break her out. It would be considered treason. Myrcella's voice trembled. I understand. She looked at Oberyn again, a silent plea shining in her eyes. She was recalling, perhaps, how Oberyn had stood as Tyrion's champion. Might he do the same for Cersei? But that was impossible, unthinkable. Oberyn gave a subtle shake of his head, and Myrcella's face fell in despair. A moment passed, heavy with sorrow. Then Arianne stepped forward, gently guiding Myrcella aside. Sweet princess, come with me. Let us speak in private. I can share with you what we know, and perhaps we can send a letter to your mother, offering moral support. Myrcella nodded, wiping her tears. As Arianne led her away, Oberyn exhaled softly. Doran's gaze locked on his brother's. In the quiet of the chamber, they shared a look of mutual realization. No matter how vile Cersei might be, Myrcella's predicament was a reminder that innocent lives were still caught in the web of royal conflict. Dorne had taken Myrcella in good faith, and she was growing up among them. That might cause tension if her mother perished under monstrous circumstances. In the days that followed, Doran drafted a careful letter to King Tommen, expressing hope that Queen Cersei would receive a fair and just trial, and that no dark arts would overshadow the proceedings. It was a gesture largely symbolic. Oberyn suspected Tywin would see it as mild interference, perhaps ignore it altogether. The faith had grown bold under the High Sparrow's leadership, and Tommen was struggling to assert royal authority. Whether the Lannisters truly had a monstrous champion or not, there was little Dorne could do from afar. Meanwhile, Oberyn's grief for Quentyn still simmered beneath the surface, fueling his cynicism toward any illusions of a new Targaryen alliance. If Daenerys did reappear, Dorne would have to reassess carefully. Their trust was badly shaken, though they recognized that Daenerys might not have intentionally caused Quentyn's death. Even so, heartbreak rarely yields easy forgiveness. Aerion, though grieving, seemed more determined than ever to strengthen Dorne's internal unity, forging pacts with minor houses, traveling between the coastal forts and the inner desert to remind them that House Martell remained strong. Oberyn sometimes accompanied her, maintaining a visible presence. Months slid by, turning autumn into winter. In Dorne, winter was mild, but they heard the rest of the continent was battered by storms. The Boltons solidified their hold on the north, though rumors suggested Stannis Baratheon had attacked Winterfell and vanished in the snow. The Ironborn's aggression lessened somewhat after the death of Balon Greyjoy, replaced by internal squabbles in the Iron Islands. King's Landing remained a nest of upheaval, with the Faith's trials dragging on, and Cersei's precarious hold on Tommen overshadowed by Tywin's presence. Tyrion's name scarcely surfaced in gossip, prompting Oberyn to suspect that the dwarf was biding his time or planning some grand escape from his father's shadow. In Dorne, the memory of Quentyn faded to a dull ache. House Martell carried on. Doran's health worsened, leaving Oberyn and Aerion to handle more responsibilities. The courtiers whispered that the Red Viper had become an unlikely pillar of stability in Dorne. Oberyn found the irony both amusing and burdensome. He had lived so long in pursuit of lethal excitements, crossing seas, dueling warriors, seeking vengeance. Now he was the steady hand that kept chaos at bay in his homeland. He often found solace sparring with his daughters, teaching Obara new spear maneuvers, or refining Tyenne's aim with throwing knives. Nwym watched him with quiet intensity, always the most poised of the sand snakes. On one such afternoon, as they trained in the courtyard, a messenger came rushing in, breathless. He brought word from the Stepstones. A fleet was approaching, rumored to belong to mercenaries from Essos, perhaps one of the free companies. Uncertain if it was an invasion or a temporary landing, Dorne readied its coastal defenses. Oberyn, accompanied by a small force, rode out to investigate. They discovered that the so-called fleet was a ragged group of Sells-Words battered by storms. They landed near the Broken Arm, seeking shelter and supplies. Oberyn negotiated with their leader, a tall Tyroshi with flamboyant dyed hair, granting them limited safe harbor as long as they did not harass the local populace. The Sells-Words claimed they had been heading for the Stormlands, possibly to take service with one of the local lords. Oberyn permitted them to sail on, relieved to avoid more bloodshed. That evening, returning to Sunspear, he found Ilaria waiting with a fresh letter from King's Landing. She handed it to him silently, her expression grave. Oberyn broke the seal, scanning the contents. It was from Tyrion Lannister again, though the tone was far more urgent. Prince Oberyn? Strange tidings abound. My father's health declines rapidly. He seems stricken by some fever the maesters cannot cure, or perhaps it is the weight of all these woes upon him. Rumor claims the Queen Regent's trial by combat is soon to be set. The High Sparrow may demand a champion from among the warrior sons. Meanwhile, Qyburn's champion looms in the Red Keep, a silent giant in white armor, rumored never to speak or remove his helm. The small folk whisper he is Ser Gregor's corpse reanimated. None can say for sure, but I have my suspicions. I write to warn you that if my father passes, the Lannisters may fracture further. My sister's thirst for power is boundless, but so is the Faith's condemnation. Tommen is caught in the middle. Lords from the Reach murmur that if Marjorie is freed, she might push for a more conciliatory approach, but her grandmother, the Queen of Thorns, is rumored to be scheming for revenge against Cersei. It is all a swirling storm, and I fear a dangerous new wave of conflict could erupt. If House Martell harbors any designs, be cautious. There are those here who still speak of Elia's fate, of how you vanquished the mountain. Some wonder if the Red Viper might strike at the Lannisters while they are weak. Others fear you'll align with the rumored Targaryen across the sea. The city is rife with paranoia. I remain your indebted friend in these times. Yours? Tyrion of House Lannister. Oberyn finished reading, a slow exhalation escaping his lips. If Tywin Lannister truly was on his deathbed, it marked a seismic shift. Tywin's iron will keep the realm from fragmenting even more violently. Without him, Cersei and the Tyrells would be at each other's throats, the faith might run rampant, and Tyrion could be cast adrift. King's Landing could descend into chaos. For Dorne, that might be a chance to gain independence or seize advantage, but it also meant risk should the crown lash out at perceived enemies. He rubbed a hand across his face, feeling the weight of it all. Illyria touched his arm. What does it say? He explained quickly, handing her the letter. She skimmed it, her eyes flicking over the lines. Tywin Lannister dying, that alone could break the hold the Lannisters have on King Tommen. And if Qyburn truly reanimated Ser Gregor, she shuddered. Abominable. Oberyn nodded, a spark of old rage in his chest. He remembered the moment he had ended the Mountain's life, how it felt like the culmination of decades of fury. If some twisted version of Gregor still walked, it was a mockery of that justice. He wanted to ride north and strike down any such monster, but logic told him to wait. The Faith's champion might do the job. Cersei's trial by combat was near. He went to Doran's chambers, finding his brother wan and tired, yet still mentally sharp. Doran read Tyrion's letter, took a pained breath, and closed his eyes. Tywin was always the spine of House Lannister. Cersei is cunning but impulsive, Jaime is changed, Tyrion is brilliant but marginalized. If Tywin dies, the family might devour itself. The Tyrells might step in, or the Faith might hamper them all. If that giant is truly Gregor reborn, the Faith's champion may be doomed. Oberyn swallowed hard. Then Cersei walks free, more powerful than ever, possibly with a monster as her guard dog. And your victory over the mountain is undone, Arianne said quietly from where she stood near the window. At least in spirit. Oberyn let out a sharp breath. I will not allow that. Perhaps we should consider revealing everything we know, inform the Faith that this so-called champion is an unnatural abomination, not truly a knight. They might disqualify him if they suspect necromancy. Doran tapped a finger on the arm of his chair. If we had proof, we could. But the Lannisters will deny it. And the Faith might demand we present that proof in person. If we fail, we risk retaliation. Remember, King Tommen is still recognized by the realm. We could be branded as liars or agitators trying to sabotage his mother's trial. A grim silence fell. Oberyn felt the old hatred coil in his gut. If Tywin dies, I suspect chaos will erupt anyway. Perhaps we can send an agent to King's Landing to quietly feed the Faith the truth. Or contact Tyrion. He might arrange to slip them the knowledge without implicating us. Doran considered, then nodded. A possibility. Let me think on it. In the meantime, we brace ourselves for the next wave. Over the following weeks, messengers poured in with scraps of news. Tywin lingered, neither recovering nor dying outright. Cersei's trial was postponed until the new moon. Marjorie Tyrell was freed but remained in the city under watch. The High Sparrow refused to yield to any royal demands. Tension soared. Some said the city was on the brink of riot. Others claimed Qyburn's champion was unstoppable. Then, at last, word arrived that Tywin Lannister had finally succumbed to what the Maesters described as a wasting fever. He died in the Red Keep, leaving behind a power vacuum. Cersei, upon hearing the news, wept in public but privately redoubled her efforts to ensure her champion would prevail in her trial. Marjorie and her family perhaps saw an opening to assert more control over the Boy King. The Faith militant braced itself, convinced that the trial would be a defining moment for the realm. Tyrion wrote a short note to Oberyn, "My father is gone. My sister is unstoppable in her desperation. Pray for the city's soul." That was all. Oberyn closed that note and gazed out over the sea. He could almost smell the blood that would soon be spilled in the capital. If Qyburn's monstrous champion shattered the Faith's chosen warrior, it would confirm the Lannisters' terrifying hold on power. But if the champion was defeated, especially if it was truly Gregor's reanimated corpse, Cersei might face execution or a life in a cell. One way or another, King's Landing was on the cusp of an upheaval that could reshape everything. As the final moon of the year rose, Dorne waited. A hush fell over Sunspear as if the air itself held its breath. Oberyn spent much of his time in the training yard or walking the ramparts, tense and coiled. Memories of the mountain haunted him, fueling a savage desire to see that if any form of Gregor walked again, it would be destroyed. Yet he could do nothing from hundreds of leagues away except rely on the High Sparrow's champion. He hated the feeling of impotence. Eventually, the fateful raven arrived, bearing the official results of Cersei's trial by combat. Oberyn opened the parchment with Ilaria by his side, hands trembling slightly. His eyes scanned the lines. By decree of the High Sparrow and the Crown, the Queen Regent's champion, a knight sworn to King Tommen known as Ser Robert Strong, fought the Faith's champion, Ser Thodin of the Warrior's Sons, upon the sacred ground outside the Great September of Baelor. Reports say Ser Thodin fought valiantly, but Ser Robert Strong seemed impervious to pain. The Faith's champion was struck down with monstrous strength, his skull crushed. Cersei Lannister is deemed innocent of all charges by the gods' judgment in trial by combat. She is restored to her position as Queen Mother and Regent, free of the Faith's condemnation. Oberyn's jaw tightened, teeth grinding so hard his head hurt. Ilaria saw the anger blazing in his eyes. He didn't need to read further. The Lannisters had triumphed again in the most twisted manner possible. A monster that might be Gregor's remains had crushed a holy knight, repeating the same horrifying violence Oberyn had once undone. The letter concluded with formalities. He crumpled the parchment, tossing it aside with a snarl. All my efforts to end the mountain, and now they flaunt some abomination in King's Landing. They crush a knight's skull just as Gregor tried to do to me. The gods, if they exist, are blind. Ilaria placed a hand on his arm. No, they are cruel. I'm so sorry. He stared at the floor, a roiling storm in his chest. Then he drew a hissing breath. Cersei lives, championed by the thing I killed. Let her have her hollow victory. The realm is not done with her yet. The day will come when that abomination meets a real reckoning. Ilaria hugged him, and he pressed his face into her hair, wrestling with his fury. He recalled the ring of onlookers in King's Landing, the cheers when the mountain collapsed. How quickly such a victory could be warped by dark arts. He clung to Ilaria in silence, vowing that if fate ever brought him face to face with that silent giant, he would finish the job once and for all. When he shared the news with Doran and Arianne, both looked grim. Doran murmured, "So House Lannister holds the regency again. Tywin's dead, but the Queen Regent is stronger than ever, enthroned by the Faith's own tradition. This bodes ill for the short term. Tommen remains a puppet in her hands, and the Tyrells, I suspect, will not sit idly by." Arianne's mouth twisted. "What of Myrcella? Will she remain here, or does Cersei demand her return?" "We have had no official request," Doran said. "But with Cersei's trial concluded, it's only a matter of time before she tries to solidify her hold on her children. She may call for Myrcella." Oberyn's anger still smoldered, but he forced himself to think strategically. "If she does, we must weigh the consequences. Sending Myrcella back could appease Cersei, keep her from turning the might of the throne against us. But we have no illusions that Myrcella would be safe with a mother who flirts with necromancy. She might be used as a pawn to ensure our compliance," Arianne said bitterly. "Poor girl. She's caught in a tangle she doesn't understand." That night, Oberyn again found himself stalking the quiet corridors of Sunspear, too restless to sleep. He stared out at the moonlit courtyard, replaying the news in his mind, the Queen Regent triumphant, the monstrous knight unstoppable. It felt like a dark echo of his own duel, one in which the mountain had prevailed. And yet, he refused to believe that cruelty would stand forever. The realm was in flux, riddled with turmoil in the north, uncertain alliances in the south, and a Targaryen queen, maybe alive, maybe lost, still out there with dragons. The story was far from done. In the months that followed, Dorne braced for the next wave of demands from King's Landing. Indeed, a message came bearing Cersei's seal, a polite but firm request that Myrcella return for her upcoming wedding to Prince Trystane in the capital, where the union would be formalized under the Seven. A cunning play by Cersei, using the betrothal as a reason to bring her daughter home. Doran weighed the request carefully, consulting Oberyn and Arianne. All recognized that refusing outright might provoke the Queen Regent's wrath, especially now that her champion had proven unstoppable. But agreeing would place Myrcella and possibly Trystane under Lannister control. Ultimately, they sent a measured reply, stalling for time by citing the desire to finalize wedding arrangements in a safe, neutral location or to wait until Myrcella was a bit older. Meanwhile, the Watchers on the Prince's Pass and the Bonway stayed vigilant. If the Lannisters marched, Dorne would respond as it always had, with fierce determination, whittling down any invader in the scorching desert. But an open war might devastate both sides, leaving the realm in tatters. So for the moment, a tense stalemate held. All the while, Oberyn felt the tension simmer. He had survived the mountain's might, avenged Elia, forced Tywin's hand in a public confession, and lived to see the old lion die. Yet the Hydra had sprouted a new head, an undead champion used by Cersei to crush the Faith's chosen warrior. Quentyn was lost to Dragonfire, severing House Martell's hopes of a swift Targaryen alliance. Dorne stood alone, proud but wary. On a still, hot afternoon, Oberyn descended into the crypts beneath Sunspear, where the remains of Elia Martell and her children lay interred in elaborate tombs, symbolic, for their bodies were never truly returned from King's Landing. But their memory was honored there. He lit a torch, approaching Elia's carved effigy. Her face, shaped from marble, looked serene in the flickering light. Oberyn stood there, heart heavy. "I avenged you," he whispered. "I killed the brute who hurt you. But the realm is still plagued by beasts. I wonder if the cycle ever truly ends." He touched the stone gently. "I have done what I can, sister. May your spirit be at peace." He stood in silence for a time, letting the hush of the crypt soothe him. When at last he emerged, he felt a certain clarity. Elia was gone, her vengeance had been delivered. But new evils rose. His duty now was to protect Dorne in the uncertain future. If Daenerys Targaryen ever returned, they could revisit that possibility. If the Lannisters advanced with their monstrous champion, they would find a nation ready to fight. And if the day came when the realm truly united, perhaps to face some threat from beyond the narrow sea or beyond the wall, then Oberyn Martell would choose the side that best served his people and honored his sister's memory. For now, he would stand guard, a viper coiled under the scorching Dornish sun, alive despite all odds, determined to write the next chapter in the story of House Martell with blood and cunning if need be. That night, he returned to Illyria's side, telling her of his visit to the crypts. She listened, her gaze tender. "Will you ever find peace?" she asked him quietly. He placed a kiss on her forehead. "Perhaps not in this lifetime. But I have you and I have Dorne. That is enough to keep me breathing." He paused, eyes reflecting the torchlight. "And if war comes or if dragons return, I will stand unafraid. I've learned that fear does not stop death, it only stops life." She twined her fingers through his, and they stood at the balcony watching the moon climb high over Sunspear's towers. The wind carried the faint smell of the sea, a reminder that beyond the horizon, the world churned with storms and possibilities. Oberyn Nymeros Martell, the Red Viper who had defied fate itself, held Illyria Sand in a moment of quiet resolve. No matter what trials lay ahead, monsters reborn, queens in exile, or a realm teetering on the brink, he would face them with spear in hand, heart unwavering, as only a true son of Dorne could. And the gods, if they cared to watch, would see that Oberyn Martell bowed to no lion's roar, no dragon's flame, and no dead giant's shadow. His life was his own, and so was the destiny he would forge for House Martell.